All right, everyone, this is a long overdue thing that we're finally doing. Dylan McCandless, Super DM 64, joining me as always.
Yes, this is not an episode of DFOS,
I
but it
mean, it
might
might
as
as
well
well
be.
be, yeah. but we're not going to call it that because it wasn't supposed to really be that way initially.
Yeah, Andres and Brayton were supposed to be here, and we wound up
They
having
fucked
to move.
up! No, Brayton's sick and Andres had prior engagements, so. And I mean, we tried to
We
record this like 3 other times before this, but it never really worked out. So we finally worked out tonight, and then Brayton got sick, and now it's just Dylan and me. So, yeah, we're finally here, though. What are we here to do?
we're here to discuss a recent, and by recent I mean almost a month ago now, film. That being Blade Runner 2049, the sequel to a film that we reviewed in an episode of DFOS that was actually an episode, Blade Runner, one of my favorite movies of all time. And there's a sequel now, and everybody loved it. Nobody watched it. We're here to talk about it.
Yeah, it's like I saw it like almost 2 weeks ago, and you saw it like over a week ago. So this is belated to all hell. I had seen it like a week out from when when we first planned to do this, and we had to move the date. So I meant to rewatch it, but I just did not get the chance. So I had to watch Halloween 1 and 2, so that fucked me up bad. No, I like
Well,
those
between
movies.
between all the rescheduling that we had to keep doing for the video, and also October being our horror month, and having a lot of those videos, scheduled, and having to record those as well, it's no wonder that this got pushed back a bit. But
Yeah.
but here,
Yeah, here we are. And so we're going to talk about Blade Runner 2049, spoiler analysis. But we're not just going to talk about that. I think we should talk about the little things that we have to discuss first because they take place prior. Wouldn't you agree? We should talk about the
yeah,
3 Blade Runner short films that they put out before the movie came out. I watched them all as one compendium, each one introduced by, oh God, how the hell do you pronounce his name? Denis
Denis Villeneuve,
Denis
Villeneuve,
Villeneuve? Okay, there you go.
Villeneuve, I don't know. Denny.
Denny Villeneuve.
Oh,
Oh, hi,
oh,
Denny.
hi, Denny.
Yeah, I'm sure he gets that joke a lot now, and he has no idea what it means. Maybe he's seen The Room. I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, he introduced them at the beginning of each one, and his voice is just amazing. It's like like a young I mean, he's not super young, but he's younger than Armando Santo, obviously, who's obviously passed away since then, but even still, he has that kind of voice. He's like, "Welcome to the world of Blade Runner 2022," and I'm like, "Oh fuck, fucking, I'm in Blade Runner in Spain. This is wild. Fucking Spain 2022. It's like all gas and stuff, but
It's
Spanish
funny
and
because
shit.
he's French, but you're right. Something about the way he talks does put you in mind of like Inigo Montoya.
I feel like I'm in like a fucking Zorro movie all of a sudden. He doesn't sound French at all, but the name certainly implies that. So, Denny, move to fucking Spain, and all your troubles will be solved. So let's start at the beginning. I like that they're all very simply titled by the year they take place in. That's handy.
It is.
So
It
so
helps one construct a timeline. I think we should definitely discuss them chronologically. I wish they
yeah.
had released them chronologically. I'll just say that
Oh my God,
because
they didn't.
no, the first, I'm pretty sure the well, the 2036 one and the 2048 one, I'm pretty sure came out in the right order, but the anime one, which takes place first in the timeline, was the last one to come out.
That's
And
insane.
so I guess because
I
the
guess I
anime.
can see why because it looks mad expensive.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I saw the 2036 one first, and rewatching it again just tonight before we got on to record, it made a lot more sense to me than it did the first time.
Mm.
Having seen both the movie and the anime, because suddenly the whole timeline made sense to me. The first time I saw it, I had no idea. I was avoiding any kind of spoilers whatsoever for the new movie, and so all I knew was what happened in the final cut of Blade Runner. And so all these events that takes place after that they're referencing in that one really flew over my head, and I was like, God, I hope this all makes sense later. It does now. It
Yeah,
makes perfect sense.
And things about the movie make more sense to me now that I've gone back and watched these. Like, I don't know how you should experience it. I really don't. I mean, obviously, you should watch the first Blade Runner first. Like, that's a given. But I don't know if you should watch these before you go see 2049. Sure, there are things that make more sense. There are characters that are more fleshed out. Sure, Jared Leto's whole performance is kind of justified by what he does here. But regardless, that's not wholly. That's not really accurate. But I really liked what they did with him in his bit, and I really wish that they could somehow have put that in the movie, even though they really couldn't have. I kind of wish I saw that in a movie theater. But anyway, we can get to it. I don't know if you should watch them though before you go to the movie theater, because man, I was so pleasantly blown away by 2049, and I don't know if I would have been had I watched these prior. You know, like I really feel like just like the original, you just gotta go in and let it draw you in. That's how that movie is supposed to be seen. So, I don't know if you should watch them before, but if you do, you again, like I said, you'll know more things about characters that were not as developed as certain other characters in the actual film. So I guess that's good. But yeah, let's start at the beginning. Blade Runner 2020.
One of those situations where you could or you couldn't, and either way, I think it would work out fine. You know, I don't think you're going to have a bad experience either way. Honestly, it's like before the movie came out, everybody kept asking Denis and like in interviews and everything like, what cut of Blade Runner should we watch before we see 2049? And for the record, it's the final cut. But he always said, in all those interviews, said it doesn't really matter. And having seen 2049, yeah, it could happen after any of those cuts of Blade Runner, so it really doesn't matter. I feel like the same applies here. You can watch shorts first. You cannot watch the shorts. You can watch them after you've seen the movie. You can watch them in chronological order or whatever order you want, as long as you can piece it together in your head. And I don't think it'll really affect how you perceive them.
Right.
Ultimately.
Yeah, I think they all work pretty well on their own, don't they? I think that that's a testament to the overall quality of all this Blade Runner stuff we've been privileged to, even though nobody's been fucking watching it. So, and I'm guilty of that with the shorts. I sort of avoided them because I'm sort of against that kind of thing on principle. I really don't like when movies do that. When they're like, oh, here's some bonus stuff that you have to sit through on the internet before you go to the movie theater. I'm just like, oh god, I barely watch trailers anymore. This is not cool. I'm a big believer in, like, if it matters to the movie, it should be in the movie. That's how I feel. Except if there's another movie that you can go watch prior. That's different. But like a little thing that's connected to the new movie, but sort of stands on its own, you know, I'm not usually about that. But these, you know, the first one I feel more than the other two, and it was definitely my favorite. But I think everybody's gonna say that it stands the best on its own, because the other two sort of just feel like setup. I say sort of very strongly, just feel like setup for the movie. But like I said, I still think they work pretty well on their own. But like, let's go chronologically through this. So the anime 20. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I think the reason that you and I would probably agree with this, and probably most people would say that the animated one is probably the best of the three, is ultimately because it's animated, and I think that lets them do way more than they could do in the live action short.
Yeah, it was pretty lit. It was pretty cool.
And for good reason. For good reason. It makes sense that that's the one that had to be animated, because it's the most complicated story-wise.
It's the most wide. It's the widest in scope.
Yeah, the other two are fairly simple. The 2036 one all takes place in one room. You know, the 2048 one is a little bit grander in scale than that, and then it takes place on a street.
It almost felt like a Netflix Marvel show. That's what that felt like. I felt like Luke Cage was beating up some guys in an alley, and I don't mean that as a criticism, because I love Luke Cage. So,
yeah,
that's the budget we were looking at there. So even still, that's not sabotaging a space launch and causing a global blackout like that. That's a different kind of thing.
Right, and the other thing I really love about the 2022 one is that it takes place only 3 years after the original Blade Runner.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And it feels the most like the original Blade Runner to me, even more so than the movie, because the world is just so much closer to that.
Well,
I mean,
Tyrell is still around. That's the big change.
well,
Even though I mean the corporation, not the man, obviously. But that's what's interesting about it, though, is that the corporation is still around, but the man is not still around, and they're still making or trying to make replicants, and it's not going well.
not only that, but Gaff shows up for a little bit. We get animated Gaff. I love that.
Oh, that was cool. Yes, man. I mean, watching this, you just think I'd really like an anime that looks like this, please. Blade Runner or not, just some kind of sci-fi anime that looks like this. I mean, a Blade Runner anime that looks like this would be amazing, but I kind of don't think we would get that, and I don't know if we really need it. I just want something that looks like that. And I don't think there's an anime out there right now that does. It's all older stuff that does. Like this is like Mad Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah. Well, again,
I don't even know what else to compare it to. I don't know anime well enough.
For obvious reasons. I mean, Ghost in the Shell is
It's a little Akira, yeah. I mean, stuff like that. Well, the old school
Ghost in the
brilliance.
Shell and Akira and all those movies.
All those things that I haven't seen.
Are essentially some Japanese dude watched Blade Runner and was like, wow, that's really cool. And then they
Let me animate that, because it would require zero money, or at least less money.
Right. Yeah. The whole idea of the blackout is a really good idea. You know, we know that there have been replicant rebellions even before the events in 2019. You know.
Well, that's why they're outlawed on Earth in the original.
Right, and the plan to set off an electromagnetic pulse to fry the registry so that nobody will know who's a replicant and who isn't is pretty genius, and it sets up how all those replicants from the Nexus 8 generation are able to still be like in hiding by the time we get around to 2049.
Because they have natural lifespans. That is good. Yeah.
Yeah, but my only problem with the concept of the blackout, and this isn't even a problem with this short, it's a problem with the movie. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it's only there to make Ryan Gosling's job more difficult as a detective. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's literally all it does.
That wasn't my only problem with it, but yeah, that is something.
The other thing it does is that it forces them to outlaw all replicants on Earth. They do the whole prohibition thing for, let's say, 14 years.
I mean, it's a really interesting science fiction idea in this universe, though, isn't it?
But you didn't even need that to cause them to do the prohibition. They could have just decided to prohibit.
No, I mean the blackout itself.
All these fucking replicant rebellions that keep going on anyway.
But I thought as an idea in and of itself, it was fascinating to take power away from this world.
Right, the blackout is a great idea. I just wish it was utilized as more in the actual film than, oh, we can't find that file for you because it got wiped out in the blackout. Guess you're gonna have to actually go do some detective work.
That's fair. We can talk about that more when we get into the actual film, because I didn't even think about that, but that is a good point. I actually had more of a problem with it because I wondered, is this world really just running on electricity still, where an EMP would work? We haven't gone any further with our power to make all this stuff run on something that would be more efficient? I guess not.
Even the most science fiction-y like versions of energy production that we have today are still producing electricity. You know,
that's true.
Wind and solar is just a way of converting natural forces into electricity. Nuclear energy is just a really like big and complicated way of producing mass quantities of electricity. Right. I don't think we're ever going to get away from that.
Right. I don't know. I wondered about if that would do the level of damage that it seems to do. But it doesn't really matter, because the fact that it happens is all that really matters, because to take any kind of power, whatever it is, away from this world, no man-made thing is going to move based on any kind of energy. That's, super interesting, because everything is dependent upon that now, because that's where the world is. There's something that Jared Leto says in his short, 2036, I think it is, where he's like, we've literally crushed the earth so that way we can survive. And to have something like a blackout happen in that world is fascinating. And the little bit that we see of it in the anime, I really would have liked to have seen more of that. Um, but the little
Yeah.
bit that we got of the stuff falling out of the sky and it going right into the Asian woman smoking the cigarette on the holo screen, like that's very impactful, obviously. But too bad we didn't get another one that just took place during the blackout. Be like a nice
Right.
mix between Blade Runner and Mad Max. Although I guess we kind of get that in 2049 when he goes to the junkyard.
So I don't get the sense that the actual blackout itself even lasted that long. The whole idea of it was to wipe out the records, you know.
Mm.
Clearly they got themselves back up and running without too much trouble. I mean, you cut to only 14 years later and seems things pretty much seem to be on the right track again.
Yeah, but I just want to know what it was like. I mean, even if it was for fucking 10 minutes, what was it like during those 10 minutes? Because it must have
Yeah.
been absolute chaos, you know?
We also don't know, do we, how much, like how far, how widespread it was, I should say. How much, like, mile, like how
I'm
far the
pretty sure
blackout
they
actually.
said it was global, but I don't know. I could be misremembering. But
Uh,
I thought you'd think it'd have to be global just to be sure.
Not if the registry is kept in one specific location. They could just black out that city and they would have achieved the same goal. Again, the goal wasn't to go all day the earth stood still and deprive us of our machines. It was, holy shit, we need to wipe out the records of our
It's
kind
that seemed to be a nice bonus though. They were into that side of it too.
because there's because and I liked this idea as well. There's this huge like anti-replicant movement all of a sudden. That's that's cropped up in the last 3 years since the original film. People are taking what is the Blade Runner's job into their own hands, and there's just like mass mobs just fucking killing replicants en masse.
Ooh, and I love the bit where those guys are, I didn't love this imagery, but I mean I liked the ideas behind it, where they're beating up the girl, and then the big and they're like, why are you sad for? This is what you were made for. And the big dude comes from behind and is like, and yeah, this is what I was made for. And he starts beating the shit out of him. That was awesome. And then you get like the reverse Blade Runner, where this dude he protects replicants.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
he is a replicant. I
I
really
know.
liked.
But
I really like.
replicant. He's more like reverse Ryan Gosling in this one, where it's a replicant that protects other replicants from dudes trying to kill them.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, like a badass black version of Roy Batty.
Yeah.
But I really liked him, and probably the coolest thing in the entire short is the flashback to him in a space battle, and he discovers that
Oh, yep.
the soldiers on both sides of the battles are all replicants.
Toy
Uh,
soldiers in a sandbox
that
is how
that's
he
a great
describes it. Oh, it's a great metaphor.
that's a great twist. Like that's something that could be it's the caliber of twist that you would expect to see like in the main movie, not just an animated short. You know, it's really impactful.
Yeah, no, that was awesome, and I love how the animation changed to be more trippy and more expressionistic
Yeah.
and less
Oh, what else?
realistic. Although it's already super stylized, which is why it was awesome.
And what the other thing I love, and this is more subtle. Uh, he gets the idea of the blackout, like the plan. He gets it from that battle because if you pay attention to the information that's coming in over his comms, they talk about how they're having electromagnetic interference.
Oh
And so
yeah, that's right.
I'm pretty sure the idea is supposed to be that that's where he got the idea of what they eventually do, which is uh, and that's the coolest thing about this animated short. We get introduced to this little cast of characters who we only get to spend 15 minutes of our lives with, but it's cool because the characters that we follow in the other shorts are from the actual movie. They've got all this other shit going on that we're already tied into. The characters in this movie or in this short exist specifically for this short, and there's a couple really interesting ones. So we were just talking about that guy. There's also the human guy who sides with the replicants and helps them carry out the blackout plan.
Oh yeah, he was
Uh,
also cool.
and then there's fucking basically Pris from the first movie, but not
Yeah,
Pris,
she was. She's sort of like a younger Pris.
Yeah. I don't know if she is younger or if she just looks that way because
She looks. Yeah, that's possible. Might just look that way because of the animation, but that's the impression that I was left with. Uh, I don't know. I really loved the mix between Blade Runner and anime aesthetic. I thought that was perfect.
Mhm.
I mean, it's tailor made for that almost. So the fact that they took advantage of it here, it's
Well, I
so
mean,
cool.
Blade Runner has been inspiring anime for so very long anyway that to see it go in the other direction is interesting.
But it's
And
nice that it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like, oh god, they literally just made it. It's literally just Ghost in the Shell, but calling itself Blade Runner. No, it feels like Blade Runner, but animated. Uh, and it
right,
feels unique in its own right. Because there is some CG in it. It's not all 2D. There's a lot of CGI. Uh, and part of the cool thing of it is that it mostly has that more old school anime look. While there is still a lot of CGI, and it gives it a more, kind of futuristic, artificial, but in a good way, kind of look.
yeah.
You know,
There's
whenever they
there's
start moving really fast and fighting the replicants, I mean, you can tell that they're not or like they're not organic people in the same sense that you and I are. That you can tell that they've been designed to be able to do that. They've been enhanced, because of the way that they start moving.
the yeah, and I guess the last thing I guess that we should talk about. They used a lot of music from the original movie in the short too. I enjoyed that, especially early
More
on.
than they did in the actual movie, which I thought
Yeah,
was
we'll talk about that
which I
later.
thought is
But
somewhat fitting, only because this takes place closer to the original film.
but since you were already talking a little bit about it, and this is probably the last thing that we need to say, the animation itself pretty good overall, especially the actual characters. The way they move is very nice. It's fluid, good stuff there. The only thing that's a little weird is some of the CG elements, and it's mostly just like environments and cars flying around. But the cars flying around doesn't look the best.
I was okay with it. I like I said, I thought that it just added. I thought most of it just added to the aesthetic. I got when there was a little bit too much motion going on, and people started to look like they were pre-rendered cinematics for a movie, as opposed to I'm watching the finished product. That was what got to me. But like I said, it certainly gives it a certain unique feel. But at the same time, you can tell what's going on. So I don't know, I'm conflicted about it. But the rest of it looks amazing. No,
Oh yeah, and then the fight scenes are something special.
it's so cool. Uh, to get to see the replicants do stuff that you just could not see them do in live action. Just like some of the flips that the girl does are fucking insane.
Yeah, it's nice to see sometimes almost like DBZ levels of action in the Blade Runner universe. It's nice. I like it.
Yes, and it makes sense that they can go there. Like Roy Batty in the first movie is going on and on about all the crazy shit that he's seen in space, and I'm like, oh my god, I would love to see that. We got to see some of it. It was awesome. We didn't get to see as much of the space shit as I kind of want, as what Roy was describing. Like, I'd like to see that in particular. That would be a cool comic or something.
Yeah. In live action, they can show how much stronger than humans the replicants are supposed to be because showing super strength in on film is really bad.
We've been there so long now. Yeah, we're good at it
Yeah,
now.
but it's the level of agility that they're able
Right.
to pull off in this animation that previously you couldn't do unless you had fucking like Bruce Lee working for you. That it really really sells it.
Right. But no, it's great. I loved it. It's definitely my favorite of the three. Totally works on its own. Like I said, I just want an anime that looks like this now. That's what this made me want. And I feel like maybe there was a little bit of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was an anime that looked this good right now? Hey, pay people making anime regularly. Maybe make something that looks like this.
Wouldn't it be great if a Godzilla anime, if something like that could ever exist, looked like this rather than reboot? Wouldn't that be?
That would be nice, yeah. But it doesn't look like that's what we're gonna get. Yeah. I liked it a lot. and I think that it's just as challenging to the medium it's made in as the movie was. So we'll talk about that. Next one.
Mm. Now, both of these the live action shorts, they're directed by the same guy, aren't they? Because
I
Denis
have no idea.
Denis was saying the directors' names when he was introducing them, and I could have swore
I
that
was
he
too
said
distracted by his accent.
I could have swore that he said the same name twice. I'm not sure though. So yeah, the
I
next one
couldn't. I
takes
just
place.
got so distracted by him going, "Welcome to the world of Blade Runner 2036." I'm like, "Oh fuck."
So yeah, the next one takes place in 2036. It's called Nexus Dawn, and this is when Wallace, who has grown powerful through, and we learned this in the main film. He's grown powerful and gained his status through ways of engineering food production because there was like a huge food problem, huge food shortage, and he's managed to do like synthetic agriculture that has just changed the game and allowed the human race to eat, which is important.
That's what we're about.
And this is the part where he convinces a board of people who make policy, I guess.
Yeah, is that the government? Like, what the hell? Who were they?
I'm not sure, but he
Led by fucking was that Wong from Doctor Strange?
did kind of maybe you might be right. I hadn't thought of that. They
That's
were
who I
very
thought it was. Benedict Wong.
they were very multicultural in that room, so I would assume that they were the big people, the people who run the different. Obviously, there are still different nations, or else they wouldn't have replicants fighting replicants in space. So those must be the people who run the nations.
I wonder.
But
I wonder. I've been wondering about that since I saw the first movie. I'd like to know how the government works exactly. We have no fucking idea. If you just watch the first movie, you might think that Tyrell runs the entire world. But watching this one, nuh-uh. I mean, definitely
Wallace,
not now.
yeah. So Wallace
Wallace is now clearly.
he convinces them to let him start producing replicants again because after the blackout, they were prohibited, and that's pretty much the short version answer of what this is.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's one way to put what happens in this. Convince is an interesting word to use for what he does. Man, Jared Leto is really good in this.
This is the thing that got me excited for the movie, to be honest with you. I was very on the fence about the idea of making a Blade Runner sequel up until the point, and I mean, you know, the early stuff that we were seeing, trailers and stuff, was all looking pretty good, but I was still casually optimistic. And one thing that was really bumming me out was the fact that Jared Leto was the villain, and I still had that Suicide Squad stank in my mouth. But
right.
then this short drops, and I'm like, damn, this guy is something special in this movie. That was really the point when I was like, all right, maybe this movie will be good. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to call him the villain because, you know, we talked about a lot in the DFOS we did on Blade Runner that Tyrell is not a villain really. He's just doing stuff.
The first movie does not have really a villain. There are people with different motivations that conflict, but they're not villains. 2049, not so. There's definitely a villain.
Right.
And his name is Jared Leto. But
Wallace, how do you feel about that? Do you think that he's too malicious? Too overtly malicious? He just seems to have a very twisted view on the world, and I think this makes I said that this kind of justifies that because I didn't even really put it together. I don't know how I didn't in the movie that he's supposed to be blind. That's way more emphasized here.
Yeah, it's made pretty clear in this that he's blind. It's made pretty clear in the movie too. I don't know how you missed that, but
they don't really make a big deal out of it, and they don't really make a big deal out of the fact that he's moving around very differently. The only thing is that his eyes are different. I just thought he was looking at the internet all the time, which he kind of is, just so we can see.
So what did you think the little while we're getting into the movie now, what did you think the little robots floating around were for?
To do robot things. He's like making science stuff happen all the time.
All right, I guess.
They're just like little drone helpers, like in Man of Steel.
But if he puts the thing behind his ear, it's clearly supposed to supplement his vision. I don't know. Uh,
I mean, now that I know that he's supposed to be blind, that makes a lot of sense. But like I said, it's the future. I thought he was just like tapped in, you know?
hmm.
But this is also not really a world that has the traditional internet because it's
No.
a retro future. That
This
was
is the future as imagined in 1982, and they've stuck to that, and I really enjoy that aspect.
oh god, the future, the retro future technology is amazing. We'll get there. Well, I mean,
But
there's a little bit of it in this. In this, there's that screen. All the screens are an interesting. It's kind of like the Force Awakens. Like you look at the screens and like the displays. They're not like they're obviously more advanced than where they were in the in. I mean, it was the 80s for us, but in 2019 in the actual film timeline, but they're not as advanced, or it's a different kind of advanced from what we have. You know, it's not like this huge jump. It's like this. It's just this shift in precision. It's weird, but it works well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Pretty much this short exists to say, hey, look what Jared Leto's doing as Neander Wallace, and you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, cool. So
Well,
yeah,
I really liked that we got to find out how he got over the prohibition, and
right,
he
yeah.
definitely took a good approach to that. But I mean, we could talk about that.
Basically, he proved to these people in very dramatic fashion that his replicants would obey no matter what the fuck you tell them to do. And by doing so, they were like, all right, guess you can make replicants.
I mean, we don't see them say that. It just seems to be somewhat implied, given the shocked looks on all their faces at the end.
But the other thing too, the other thing and that's very important that this short points out through dialogue, is that the world, you know, I mean, it was already in a pretty shitty place in 2019 in the original Blade Runner. By the time we get around to 2036 and the blackout has happened and all this other crazy shit, and there's been some sort of an agricultural collapse that Wallace barely saved humanity from, the human race as it stands on Earth is in very dire straits, and they know that. And you know, he offers them this way to rebuild, and he proves that it's pretty much foolproof. And you know, they really don't have a choice but to go along with it, even though they're obviously disgusted by what they've seen. And you know, I meant to say this a minute ago, and then I think I got sidetracked on something else. You were asking about if I thought Wallace was too outwardly malicious, and if it took away too much.
Dylan's on hold, but anyway, go ahead.
Because of how the original film had not had a villain. But no, and it's because Wallace has the trademark of a great film villain, in that he is completely convinced that what he's doing is the right thing to do, and he makes a pretty damn good argument for it as well.
Right. Well, his whole point is, yeah, sure, the off-world colonies are thriving, but it's not enough it's not enough for the sheer volume of the human race. We need to keep pushing outwards. What we have now is not good enough. It will continue to slip through our fingers. You know, again, like I said before, there's that great line, we've had to crush the earth to survive. He wants to keep crushing it down more and more until there's nothing left, and humanity is completely self-sustained on their own in space. That's what Wallace wants, and I think that is really cool and interesting. And I got a much greater sense of that with this as opposed to just the film.
Yeah, well,
but
the fact that he's still on Earth makes a whole lot of sense, because you know, he's blind, and in the first film we found out that, you know, the people who don't get to go off world to the colonies is usually because there's something wrong with them, you know,
right.
Physically. So that might be one of the reasons why he's still on Earth, and he wants Star Trek future. He wants humanity in the stars. End of story. He talks about that in the actual film as well, and the way to do that is through, as with many things, is through slave labor.
And
so,
his voice is perfect. Sometimes I question if it's too cheesy, and then I'm like, nope, it's absolutely perfect for this kind of character. because
It's a million times better than fucking Richard Nixon Joker that we got in Suicide Squad.
if I mean, but you can still tell it's the same. It comes from the same vocal cords though, and that's the interesting thing. But it's exactly the right kind of unrealistic because sure, a person in our world probably wouldn't be like this, but this isn't our world. Very far removed from it by this point, and that's it started as our world. That's what's interesting about it. But this is a guy who is distinctly built of this future world and is going to try and shape it, and that's what he's able to get across with the voice. It's charismatic in the most interesting way because he's so it's almost like an over the top level of subdued.
Right.
He just feels so distant and drawn into himself, and I think that makes the blindness make more sense then as a character trait.
You watch this movie and his performance as the villain, and you realize that DC got it bass backwards. Jesse Eisenberg clearly wanted to be playing the Joker the whole time, and Leto clearly should have been Luthor instead. But
Yeah,
he's great, and I think this short really sets him up in that way. So we've been dancing around the fucked up
I
shit
wish
that he
I wish
does.
I would have watched this just for his character's sake before I had seen the movie.
We've been dancing around the sort of fucked up display that he does to demonstrate the what's the word I'm looking for? The
The
obedience
obedience, yeah.
of his replicant. I was looking for a different word, but I couldn't find it, so I settled for obedience. Anyway, so when they first come into the room, the people that he's talking to, the, again, government, I guess, don't know that the guy's a replicant. They probably wouldn't have ever even thought of it because, they've been prohibited and they've been illegal on Earth illegal on Earth they have been since before the first movie, but they've been prohibited, like, from production at all for the past 14 years at this point, so that they don't even think, oh, the guy with him might be a replicant, but he totally is. And then he basically has him commit what I can only describe as harakiri right in front of them. And
Sacrificing himself for the greater good, quote unquote.
and it's really a powerful moment. When you agree.
I would have to agree, yeah.
It tells you everything you know about this guy's character right off the bat.
What he's willing to do, why, and I also think that they set that up really well towards the beginning, where there's that great bit. I can't remember the exact exchange of lines, but it's just like the replicant subject is not open for debate, yet we are debating. For the man who gives us life is reopening the quandary. That's the big point that he makes. He's like, listen, we all know that y'all can't exist without me, and I'm telling you that y'all can't exist without replicants. And now I'm also going to prove to you that I have the greatest shit when it comes to replicant juice. Like this is going to be, it's going to be great. Trust me. And he shows them that by having somebody, somebody is an odd way to put it, but he has a replicant kill himself right in front of them all. So that way they're sure.
Okay, I know replicants. Replicants love me.
I have the best replicants. Turns out that that's not entirely inaccurate. They certainly are the most obedient, and they're the most. They do the job that they're supposed to do. We see a lot of that in the movie itself. But that's a really good scene. I was almost reminded of like, it's similar. It's similar visually. I mean, there's very different themes going on. They're somewhat different. In the scene in the movie where he witnesses the replicant birth, and he really doesn't even treat the replicant as if it's even there until the end of that scene, which is very similar to how this ends. We'll talk about that obviously in more detail when we talk about the movie, but you just get this sense that even actual people he doesn't really view in any kind of equal sense. He feels so distant and above everybody. And Tyrell didn't have that. Tyrell was a very different... He felt distant and he felt larger than life, but he felt like a mad inventor. He felt like a really, really smart, crafty guy who got in a little too over his head. That's how Tyrell came off to me in the first movie.
Right. Yeah. But Tyrell, he might go a little too far in places, but it's not through any malicious intent. It's not through any. I don't really get the sense that he has an overinflated ego. Certainly, what ego he does have seems to be pretty well earned. It's just that he's very devoted to his craft and also very, very good at it, and it's a passion. You know, he's pursuing a passion for science. You know.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, you just get the sense that, again, he's kind of in over his head. He just, and that's the story of a lot of scientists. He does feel very Victor Frankenstein. Any number of scientists who are, you know, killed by their creations for simply being created. It's a different kind of thing with Wallace, though. Wallace doesn't seem to really even care about, oh, cool, isn't this awesome that I'm doing this? It's like, I must do this. What else would I do? This is what must be done. It's more mechanical. It's less emotional, and I think that's so interesting. That Tyrell's replicants were the ones that were so emotionally unstable, and Wallace's whole thing is that they're not, and his are less so. I think that's so interesting and makes a lot of sense given who designed them.
Yeah, he's not entirely dissimilar from Woody Harrelson's character in Wolf is One of the Apes, in that he feels very purpose-driven. He feels as though he has some sort of higher calling that he is working towards. You know, he speaks in these very grandiose, almost biblical ways because he has this view of himself as this like chosen person who has this grand mission in life, and that's what he's pursuing.
I really like that we don't get any more after the replicant kills itself. There is no, like, we agree. There's no dumb line like that, because there doesn't need to be. We saw the movie, or we're going to see the movie. We know that replicants are a thing.
Right. There's a Blade Runner movie coming out. Clearly there are going to be replicants.
Right, so we don't need them to go into any more detail than that. Because what also distinctly tells you a lot is the different facial expressions on all of the government leaders, because they don't all have the same expression.
Yeah, especially that really scraggly looking white guy.
Yeah, he's not into it at all. He kept saying, "This is wrong. This is wrong." He clearly had some bad shit happen to him either before or after the blackout involving some replicants, and he's not into this.
Right.
That's what I think those scars... I don't know if they were scars, they were some kind of burns, whatever they were on his face. He had some kind of facial thing. They were like red lines. Did you see that? You only see them prominently in like one shot, because the rest of the time he's shot far away. He only gets like one moment to really say something important, which is the moment I just alluded to.
Whatever his deal is, whatever caused him to be so adamantly against replicant technology, he clearly has a strong moral problem with what Wallace is proposing.
Right. But he don't say anything after that.
And I don't know who the actor is, but he sells it really well.
And the one woman is against it at the beginning, but then her face tells you that she's totally flip-flop by the end. And the only reason is because of the control thing, so you can tell what her whole problem was. The scraggly white guy, he's obviously got a philosophical problem with replicants from a base level, but the woman seems to only be concerned with if they function properly or not. So clearly she's satisfied. Wong from Doctor Strange, he seems conflicted, but he knows that it's got to be done in order to get people into space. That seems to be his facial expression. And their
asses are over the fire. They don't have a whole lot of options at this point.
And
The,
it seems like the black dude had the least resistance to it from the get go. It seemed like he was almost like it almost seemed like he went into the meeting knowing what was going to happen.
either that or he just is the opposite of that white guy, and that maybe he's for reintroducing replicants.
Maybe that's why he kind of figured it. He was like, this is the way the world is going now. We need these things again in order to lift our heavy shit because we can't do it anymore. We don't have the time or the space.
Yeah, and I think there's really something interesting to be said for a society that had this really weird, fucked up piece of technology that they abandoned, and then years later they have to go back to it out of desperation.
Yeah. I can't even think of something like that. You know, I can. Nuclear energy. We haven't fully abandoned it yet, but it's sort of our nuclear energy.
Right.
That's interesting.
Nuclear is an interesting case because it doesn't go wrong very often, unlike replicants. But when it does, it's on a massive scale.
But it's
You know?
sort of, you can compare it because replicants don't always go wrong on a massive scale. A couple people will die or whatever. But if there's a big riot or if there's a big rebellion, you know, that's the problem. That's why I think it's more comparable.
Mm.
Anyway, so I think we should keep this going though because we still have a whole movie to review.
Right. Yeah. The final short centers around Dave Bautista's character.
This is only a year before the actual movie.
Yeah, 2048. And basically, I think the idea is supposed to be that this is the initial tip that eventually leads, spoilers, Ryan Gosling to find Bautista at the beginning of the film proper.
Yeah.
This is where he slips up. Basically, there's not a whole lot to say here. Basically, he gets into a street fight, and somebody called and says, "Hey, there was a replicant here," and he's clearly talking to the LAPD.
This really felt like one that I almost don't know if we needed. It's mostly just there to set up plot. And not plot that
Right.
needed to be set up, really. Like, yeah, great. We get to see that Bautista's character. You know, we definitely build up more of a likability for him because we don't really have time for that in the actual film.
Right.
Because he's taken out of it so quickly. But
That's what I like about it.
that's
Is that
all I really liked about it, though. I mean, I also thought it was super generic too. Like the way they got that across. He's got the relationship with the girl. I like that he's showing her old books, and there's that bit where he's like, "Oh, it's about a priest who is trying to come to grips with his humanity," and she's like, "Is it sad?" And he doesn't answer her. That's great.
Yeah.
But I thought that was cliche, and overall, what we got here didn't justify it enough for me.
Yeah. But again, it was nice to get more of a sense of what his character was about, and also, before the film came out and seeing him in the trailers, I had assumed that he would be more like a. Again, this was before I really knew what to make of the movie. I was sort of figuring that he would be kind of like Leon from the first film, kind of the just there as like the muscle, and that's not. I mean, he is the muscle, but that's not all that there is to him at all. There's this huge other sensitive side to him that I think this sets up pretty beautifully. But again, I don't know if it's necessarily needed.
Yeah, I didn't really think so. I liked why Ryan Gosling got the tip on him because he decides to intervene and reveal his replicantiness to beat the shit out of these street guys, but accidentally at the cost of revealing his identity. Not only to those people who were around, but inadvertently to the Los Angeles Police Department as well.
I mean, this is a whole year before the film, so clearly it still took some time to track him down after this. But this is sort of.
I don't know why they had the address.
I don't know.
I get the sense that there's a lot of administration. They were like, we've got lots of replicants to track down. This guy will go lower on the list.
Maybe.
But taking a year is insane. Unless something, maybe like the tip didn't pan out. Like, we didn't actually see the cops go to meet that dude. that shady ass street dude who could have been mugged 2 seconds later. So maybe
Yeah,
something happened.
that's also true. Maybe that address was a fake. Who knows? Yeah.
He could have
Batista's
moved
up.
again. I don't know. It's no, he definitely didn't move again because that location was very much so stamped down for a long time.
Batista's clearly been a hiding replicant for a very long time, and I get the sense that he's pretty good at covering his tracks. So
Yeah,
I,
I mean,
I
I
feel like
really like him, so I'm with you. It's got a lot going for it in terms of developing his character. But that's it. There's really nothing else going on here.
there's this would actually be a great story that I would like to see in like a prequel comic or something. There's clearly a whole game of cat and mouse in between this short and the actual film that we didn't get to see, and I'd love to know how it went down.
Right. Because 2049 approaches the Blade Runnering very differently than the first film because we're dealing with a Blade Runner who's active as opposed to a Blade Runner who is about to not be active anymore. So, I would like to see a little more of the actual replicant hunting because we don't really get as much of that after the opening of 2049. So with that said, do you want to get into the actual film proper?
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot to say about Nowhere to Run. Nice fight scene.
Yeah, like I said, it's the like a really good Netflix Marvel fight. So that's cool. It looks good. But yeah, no. Well, let's get into the movie proper because there's a lot of things to say. Lots of dividends to tally up. Lots of fan theories to negate. So, Blade Runner 2049. Dylan, did you like it?
I liked it a whole lot. In fact,
Yeah.
I'm at odds with myself of whether or not it's my favorite film of the year. I'm reevaluating it and War for the Planet of the Apes to try and decide which is my favorite, but it's one of the two, certainly. This was a transcendent experience. I still like the original more, but I don't. It's one of those situations where I don't fault. Like before I went in to see the movie, I kept hearing a few people who were doing a review saying, "Oh, I liked it better than the original," and I kept saying, "Ah, there's no way I'll like this better than the original," and I didn't. But I came out of it thinking I can totally see why people would though.
Yeah, I can
It's
I
it's
can totally see that as well.
it's a Terminator or an Alien situation. And by the way, I think this enters the conversation now for best sequels along with Terminator 2 and Aliens, in that I personally prefer Terminator 2, but I completely understand why people prefer Terminator 1. And I personally prefer the horror vibe of Alien, but I totally get why people love the action vibe for Aliens. It's one of those pick your poison, both are great situations. And
It's
this
hilarious
was
that we're flip flopped on both Alien and Terminator.
yeah, that's right. You prefer Terminator 1 and Aliens, don't you?
It's hilarious. But yeah, no,
But again, I get both of those though.
yeah. Yeah, no, man, I loved this though. Blade Runner 2049. I went in not really knowing what to expect. I didn't see a whole lot of the trailers. I saw a little bit. But before I watched the movie for DFOS, the original, I mean, I didn't really give a shit. So I was like, oh, that looks vaguely interesting.
Right.
I'd seen like one of the trailers in theaters in front of it or whatever it was, and I was like, oh, that looks amazing, but I don't really know that much about Blade Runner. I barely remember anything about the original, so I'm not really all that excited. But then I watched the original movie and I was like, oh, I'm excited now. So
I mean, you asked me a year ago.
I went in going, I don't know if this is going to be good, but I hope it's going to be good.
Yeah, you asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, whether I wanted a Blade Runner sequel, and I would have said, hell no, because the first movie is so self-contained, and it still is, but they managed to pull it off. What can I say? And I think it comes down to the original writer for the first movie, Hampton Fancher, had an idea, of how to do a sequel all these years later. And, that sounds really basic, but so few films these days are actually based on just having a good idea.
They're not really. the pure conceit so rarely comes from, oh, I have an idea for a story. Let's just tell this story. And that's
Right?
what this is.
And it's really a miracle that this movie was greenlit at all. I mean, the first film is a cult hit that is revered in hindsight and held up as a super influential, very important science fiction film. But it didn't make its money back in theater back in the day. And the fact that they not only greenlit this sequel, which I can see based on again the cult status, but the fact that they not only greenlit this sequel, but gave it a massive budget. This is essentially like what, like a $200,000, or not 200,000.
I was gonna say it's definitely not that.
200. I meant to say 200 million, or however much it is. It's an insanely high budgeted art film, basically,
Yeah.
and that is
Isn't that awesome though?
it's fascinating that it got greenlit at all. It's a miracle. This is just not the sort of thing that happens anymore. Maybe in 1982.
Probably just because I don't know, not just because, but without Harrison Ford, I don't know if that would have happened. If they hadn't got Rick, had him come back to reprise his role.
Yeah, well, that's true, and you know what? That goes for the writers as well. I saw an interview with Hampton Fancher and the younger guy who co-wrote this with him, and they basically said their idea from day one was that Deckard was going to be in it, and if Harrison Ford had said no, there wasn't like a plan B of how to make this movie without him. And having seen the film, I can definitely see that. So if Harrison Ford had turned it down,
Yeah, man, this is a $200 million movie. Oof.
it definitely.
The money was on the screen and it was well spent, but I don't know if you guys are gonna make it back.
Uh, I don't know about internationally, but they certainly bombed here in the States, which is, that's a shame. The two smartest, movies of the year, both fucking bombed. And with war, partially I think it was due to bad marketing and bad release. Like, it's not a
That
summer
didn't
movie, and they tried.
bomb. It just underperformed.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. It underperformed, but I think it's because again it was marketed as like a big summer action movie, and it was released in the summer, and it was not that at all. They
It
should
had
have
a
saved
good.
it.
It had its weekend. That's what War had.
Yeah, they should have saved it for the fall. I think they probably could have released it at the same time as Blade Runner 2049, and they would have fucking crushed
I
Blade
mean,
Runner
they
20.
fucking released it the week after Spider-Man. They're lucky they had their weekend. That was my whole thing at the time. They were a week out from the opening weekend of Spider-Man: Homecoming. They are so lucky that they made number one.
Right.
And then a week or two later was something else. Like I don't know what else, but there was another big movie. And
This film, on the other hand, I feel like part of the reason it bombed is that, people knew ahead of time that it was a long movie. A lot of people don't want to go see a 3-hour movie. So I think that had part to do with it. But I'm really nervous that we're not going to get this again in the future, because we've obviously been voting with our dollars against intelligent science fiction in favor of, not more Transformers, because that didn't do well this year either. But, the next big dumb Hollywood thing,
right, whatever that'll be. But yeah, I feel like overall this year was better than certainly last year. But at the same time, well, that was my big that.
This year has been much better quality-wise. Box office-wise, until very recently when it came out, it was a drought.
Well, box office-wise, I mean, movies have been progressively getting hit harder and harder year after year, so it's inevitable. But my big takeaway from this on that front was, man, I just want to keep getting science fiction movies with this kind of budget, Like, I don't care what franchise it is or if it's even a franchise. I just want science fiction stuff with this kind of budget. I want to see worlds like this with technology that we have now, because my God, every fucking frame was a film unto itself. That's what's so cool here. That's why we need to keep getting stuff like this. It's because this stuff is an experience. It's not just a fucking movie. You go to this and it's like going to another planet.
Yeah, and that's why this movie was a good sequel to the original. The original is well known for how, just like on a technical level, how spotless and almost perfect it is, and then the problems have tended to be, pacing and story wise for people who don't like that movie. But in terms of like the way it looks and
And
sounds and all
guess where
that,
this one also has problems.
yeah. But but in terms of the way the original film looks and sounds and all that, it's a technically just spotless, pristine, especially with the more recent transfers, just a beautiful film. And this captured that as well. Um, Denis has said that he took this job because he didn't want somebody else to fuck up a Blade Runner sequel because he's obviously a fan of the original, and that's the perfect reason to accept this job, because this is very well done. And also, a lot of credit goes out to the cinematographer, Roger Deakins, I think his name is,
Yeah, Roger
who
Deakins is a big name, so
who
that's
did
so cool.
who did great work in this.
Yeah,
I mean,
he really did.
this is the guy who did, fucking Skyfall and Shawshank Redemption and the fucking remake of True Grit, which I really love. So the man's got chops. But this movie, man, fantastic. And that was another area where the first film shined was in its cinematography. So, um,
I really have mostly positive things to say. Uh, Loved the cast, loved the characters they were playing. I loved the arcs for all of them. I thought they all got interesting things to do. Um, I heard criticisms that this was one of the only things I went into like, oh, I wonder if I'll agree with this. I heard people say this is a beautiful, immaculately made, what was the word? I'm trying to remember the word. A movie that's devoid of any substance. I don't know what movie they saw, but that's not the movie that I saw.
no, this
I don't know
movie is
what
chock
substanceless
full.
spectacle they were watching, but I got quite a bit of substance out of this film.
This movie is chock full of substance.
It's rather dense, in my opinion.
It has both style and substance, and I don't think that it even prefers one over the other. Like that's a criticism I hear a lot about like Tarantino. And while I don't personally agree, I can see it. I can see why people would think that about him.
Mm.
This, I don't know how you look at this and say that there's no substance. It takes
The
the
style in
theme,
and of itself has substance to it, in my opinion. That's what's so cool about it.
it takes all the themes and everything that was explored in the first film, and it expands on them and explores them in new ways, and
Take a
it's
perfect example. Uh, just the background ads in Blade Runner, the way they expand upon those in this movie, how advanced they've become, and I mean,
I
you
really
just
love
look at
the
that.
production.
You just look at an image of those, and you can just pick out a number of different bits of info about this world from those ads.
Yeah, I really love the production design on this movie. I liked that it felt like a natural progression of the world that we saw in 1982. It felt like that exact world 30 years later. And yes, some things have gotten more advanced, but then a lot of it still looks the same. It's just like if you look at today versus 30 years ago, which would have been what, the 80s. Like, yes, a lot of shit has advanced and gotten different, but then there's also a lot of shit that's still the same, if maybe a little different looking. And it feels that way. It feels uh, perfect in that sense. It really nailed that.
Yeah, I thought what they did advanced was really interesting and made a lot of sense, and the things that were the same also made sense. I'm glad the cars aren't that different. Because
Yeah,
they wouldn't be. You look at cars compared to 30 years ago, it's like, yeah, they're slightly differently designed. They're a little sleeker, they're a little more streamlined, they're a little less bulky, but they're still fucking cars. It's still the same idea.
yeah. The
So
only
so
really, the
you
only
see basically the same tweaks in this.
yeah, the cars in this movie pretty much look like some ones from the first movie. The big addition here is the drone that
Yeah,
pops out
the
of the back,
drone is the big addition. Yeah,
and that's a really cool idea. I
that's
love
one
that
of your
Ryan Gosling.
more that's one of your more overt. Oh, this is now, but it's the 30-year future from Blade Runner. So I thought stuff like that was cool. And I mean the big one. I thought that maybe we would talk about this later, but I'll bring it up now. I don't fucking care. My God, one of my favorite things about this movie was Cell Phone Wife, Joy. That
Mm.
is so good. It's such brilliant
And very
commentary, isn't it?
and very unexpected. I would have
Yeah,
never.
I had no idea that's what she was. Didn't didn't put that together.
Which, to be honest, my expectations for this movie were very shot because I don't think the trailer, even though the trailer for this movie was really good, I don't think the trailer even did it justice. I went into this movie expecting it to be, it takes place in the Blade Runner world, and they definitely got the look of it right. I could tell that just from the trailer. But it's going to be a lot more actiony, and it's basically going to be the aliens to that movie's Alien. And a little bit, but not really.
There's not a whole lot of action. In reality, the action that's there is only more over the top than the original because Ryan Gosling is a replicant. That's it. He's able to take more punishment.
He doesn't get his ass kicked as much as Deckard did. My God, Deckard's in so much of the first movie just getting his ass handed to him.
Right.
Uh,
Harrison Ford in all of his action roles, like he may be a big action, he may have been at one time a big action star, but his characters were never they were never Arnold Schwarzenegger. They were always, more kind of, sly, idea men who weren't as good beating the shit out of other people. Like Indiana Jones isn't really like that. He can take a lot of damage, but he's not like he's not gonna take out 15 guys at once.
Well, when he started out, being Han Solo and everything, I mean, all those tropes weren't really around yet. Your Arnolds and your Slys.
Right, where it's just like gunning down 10 people at a time, right?
And he always plays a more old school type of hero, and then I guess he just sort of got typecast in that way.
Yeah, and then he's playing your presidents in Air Force One, which feels like it could have been Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sly.
Right, yeah.
That would have been so much cooler. I love Air Force One, and I love Harrison Ford in it, but Arnold Schwarzenegger as the president, I feel like that's a better 90s action movie. Because you can't make that now, but if that had been made in like 1995, oh my God. The world would be a better place. Anyway.
I feel like in today's world, people would be clamoring for a movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger gets to be the president.
I feel like, no. They're clamoring for a real world where Arnold Schwarzenegger is the president. As opposed to the alternative, I guess. Because he wasn't great in office when we actually had him in office, so I don't know. I don't know if that's really the direction we want to take this planet.
But if we're gonna elect a TV personality, let's elect
definitely Arnold over again the alternative. So what was I saying? I was saying something. I mean, Cell Phone Wife was where we were at. So Joy.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, the reveal of that. Yeah, you were saying the expectations. We start talking about the action and all that. Okay.
Yeah, I never anticipated that kind of commentary to be in the movie. I knew that chick was in this movie and that she was playing a character named Joy, and I figured, all right, she'll probably be a replicant.
And
not really.
Love interest. She's not a replicant. Yeah.
She's even more artificial than that. She's a holographic, basically super Siri, who Ryan Gosling has a romantic interest in. Think her, but in Blade Runner.
She's consumer Jarvis from Iron Man. That's what she is.
Essentially.
But she's a consumer version, so it's all the limitations of consumer products. She's an iPhone. She's Jarvis if Jarvis was an iPhone, is the idea. And what's really brilliant about it is that you have a future where cell phones are not really going to be a thing because it's Blade Runner, so we have different versions of that technology. So
right.
We have this thing to replace it that does some of the exact same things, but also exaggerates the impact that this technology that we actually have may or may not be having on our society by showing the absolute extremes that it could have if they're taken to those furthest extremes in the Blade Runner society. So, she's not a cell phone, but he carries around a method of communication with her in his pocket. So, and she's constantly sending him stuff. I don't know what. I don't know why she's constantly bothering him while he's working. Fucking with her little... It's like, you're tracking him like every second. You should know exactly what he's doing. You shouldn't be bugging him while he's in the middle of talking to the people who made you.
I mean, well, yeah. Well, she is programmed to be a woman. So.
You make a solid argument. No, that
There
was
needs to be a scene. There needs to be a scene where Ryan Gosling turns to her and is like, "When you hear me detecting, that means I'm working.
yeah.
Whatever the fuck I'm doing."
There's a lot to pack with just her though, and what I really thought was cool about her and everything about that technology was that that's got nothing to do with the. I mean, I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with the replicants because obviously she's there to be somewhat of a contrast in terms of what kind of artificial version of humanity she's representing.
Right.
But
Thematically, she's more replicant than the replicant.
right. However, as a science fiction idea, it's completely different and feels like it could be its own story. I mean, it was that was her, but this is. I mean, Joy is more advanced than her by a long shot, obviously.
Isn't it interesting how the future of Blade Runner, because it was envisioned in the 80s, is both more and less advanced than us at the same time?
That's what's so cool about it, though, D, is that it still feels futuristic, but it also still feels somewhat retro. And it's sort of like when you watch Batman the animated series, like it feels timeless for that reason. So in 30 years, in 30 years, when people watch this one, they're not going to go, "Oh, I can clearly tell that this was made for people in 2017." I mean, yeah, if you were around in 2017, you'll see the things that were being commented on, but it's not a of the moment kind of movie that's just for us.
And I assume it's very inaccurate, but I don't know. We have to wait 2 more years to see about that. So.
The original Blade Runner, yeah.
The way things are going, it might not be that inaccurate.
I mean, we don't have Roy Batty, so we already know that things aren't going to go that way.
That's true.
Because he was activated in 2016, so.
That's true. Sad. Why didn't we make replicants? Human race.
Did you see the movie?
Who am I kidding?
Did you actually watch the movie, Dylan?
Who am I kidding? We can't even approve fucking stem cells.
No. How are the
Can you imagine?
I mean, if we have replicants, he could actually have his wall, so I don't know why. Can
you imagine
somebody to build it?
Can you imagine if replicant technology actually did exist? Or was being proposed, the fucking religious outrage.
Everybody would be outraged. I mean, it's something that has to exist in this Blade Runner world where we need it to be. And we live in this world where technology has replaced humanity on a moral level, where it doesn't really matter that it's morally wrong. It's technologically helpful. You know, it's the same idea as.
I don't even know if the creation of replicants is morally wrong. I think it just depends on what you use them for. You know what I mean? How you treat them.
Sure. I mean, it's just. I think that it's greatly dependent upon the world, you know? And I mean, even in the original, they were outlawed on Earth. They were only to be used on off-world colonies because the whole idea of it just isn't cool here, you know? And I just think that that's really interesting that we have this world where the constant progress and the constant, or not even constant progress, but just the constant barrage of advanced technology becomes nullifying. You know, it's like Star Wars, where we take this super advanced technology for granted because either it's been around for a long time or there's just so much of it. Who cares? It's disposable. And I think in that world where you have so much disposable, incredible technology, disposable artificial people are just a step away. But it's just a matter of how far away are we from that? That's the question. I don't know if we're very far, is the thing. Or very far. We'll have to see. So Dylan, I think we should start with in terms of actual like super detail. Let's get to Ryan Gosling because he's really the big part of the whole package here, and
yeah,
he really kind of sold me on this whole thing from the onset. How about you?
You know, Ryan Gosling is not not one of my favorite actors. Not to say that I think he's bad. It's just that I don't necessarily get excited for a film just by the fact that he's in it. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, me neither.
But so the announcement that he was in the film didn't really stoke my flames for wanting to see the film much more. But having seen the film, he's fucking great in this movie.
Yeah, and I mean the direction they took with his character helped a lot. I think he was just super interesting. I mean,
Yeah,
making a replicant a Blade Runner, fuck me, that's awesome.
yeah, and you know, a lot of the time leading up to seeing the movie, I was wondering, is he going to be a replicant or is he going to be a human? And I like the fact that they tell you right off the bat. He's a
You know,
fucking
that's not a
replicant.
mystery at all. I mean, that's part of the story. Is that we've gotten to this place in the Blade Runner world where it's just more efficient to have them kill each other, isn't it? Just like we do in space, huh?
Yeah, well, it's certainly
It's almost like what happened with Deckard led to the idea of K, as he's known, because you had a man there who started to have a lot of conflict about his humanity with his job, so he wasn't doing the job right, even though he was good at it. The whole point of K in this movie is he's a good boy. He's obedient. He does what he's supposed to do because that's what he's supposed to do. And you are supposed to do what you are supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do.
is that right?
Yep. I loved all that stuff. It's all really good and interesting. When we get that first scene of him in the room and he's going through his little baseline test, that's where you really get the sense of like, oh man, they do not really treat him like a person, do they? Because Wyatt, and it was so impactful because we open with him. We don't know he's a replicant right away. We don't put that together until Dave Bautista is like, so you kill your own kind, huh? Oh, what? Because prior to that,
Yeah.
he's just a Blade Runner. He's just outside, fucking around with the drone. He's being all sly and stuff. He's just acting like Harrison Ford would in the original. And then you have that bit. And after that, just things start to really, really, really come together. Especially when you get to the room and he's going through his little baseline test and you just start to go, oh my god. Things have gotten even more fucked up in this world. I loved that.
Yeah, that was all very well handled.
What about it? What about it really struck out for you?
Mm, well, I just thought that he did a really good job selling it, and I liked, you know, being a replicant. I mean, because he didn't pick up on it until Batista said that, but he definitely doesn't act quite human.
No, and
You
I
know,
think that's why they cast him well. Have you seen La La Land or any of his movies?
I was subjected to The Notebook once.
Oh, I forgot that he's in that. That's like his big movie, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what he's most well known for. He's certainly not most well known for those episodes of Goosebumps that he did as a kid.
So I've seen La La Land, or most of it. I don't think I finished it. It's been a while, and I don't remember because I did not like it. And he was part of the reason I didn't like it. I mean, it's not my kind of thing anyway, but he in it was just so obnoxious and full of himself and unlikable. I don't know if it was the script or if it was his performance. His character wasn't great anyway, but the way he was performing it just made it seem 10 times more obnoxious. He has this subdued superiority in his voice. Don't you get that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Like this almost snobbish kind of like, oh, well, you know, to strangers, Harrison Ford.
Not
Like,
similar. It's not dissimilar to Rachel when you first meet her in the first Blade Runner.
yeah, that's a good point.
Before she starts having her crisis, which is interesting because Ryan Gosling goes through a similar, if somewhat opposite, crisis in this film.
Oh
Before
my
she goes through her,
god, that's true.
before she goes through her identity crisis, she comes into the room and she's very, you know, sort of prim and proper and straight laced and has that sort of superiority. And she almost, I don't think she was, but you almost get the idea that her character would would talk in like that fake British accent that they used to do in American movies back in the day. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah, like in the
you know,
Birds, like everybody in the Birds.
yeah, she had the what is it called, like transatlantic or whatever that accent
Oh
was that they used.
God, what a bunch of
Uh,
jokes of human beings.
yeah, I like that accent.
I do not care for it.
It was a fancier time, Bill. Anyway, she but anyway she
Fancier,
had that
total rip off of a time.
she has she has that whole thing, and then after she realizes that she's a replicant, she obviously becomes a bit more human. Kay, same deal. He
He gets
doesn't find out
snarkier.
he doesn't find out he's human. That's not the twist, but he definitely has
I
a
mean,
similar
he thinks he is for a second.
he definitely has it, well, at least half. He definitely has a similar identity crisis that we'll get into when we get to the big spoilery thing. But yeah, over the course of the film, we see him go from, well, I mean, it's pretty much set out outright when he fails that baseline test that he's way off. There's something out of whack.
Right.
And it's because he's experiencing this this psychological sort of trial, I guess you could call it.
Right. Everything with the memories and just everything with the psychology in this was really good and a really good expansion upon the original. This is a totally different movie from the original as well. I think that's really important to say. You know, it's not because it's an action movie, because it's not. It's because there's a lot more going on, I feel, in the original. I don't mean theme-wise. I just mean there's more characters. There's more. I feel like there's more subplots. I could even be wrong. I'm just saying it feels this way.
Yeah, no, I feel like this movie definitely has more going on because here's
Yeah.
the thing about the first movie, and I talked about this when we reviewed it. The plot itself often will take a back seat to the themes and what the film is saying. And that's the reason that a lot of people don't like it. There's certainly some logical things that you can ask when you watch the movie about, well, how did he? Because there's not actually a whole lot of detecting going on in that detective story. There's a little bit when he figures out where the first city is, and then after that, the rest of the replicants just sort of stumble and fall into his lap, one after the other. But
Well, I mean, because he brutally murders the first one that he detects. So.
but again, it's because there's all this thematic exploration going on, and so the plot has to kind of take a back seat. This movie, and I think this is part of the reason why the runtime is so long, tries to do both. It
Yeah.
tries to. I think it's well aware of the criticisms concerning how little detective work Deckard actually does in the original film. I think it was very aware of that, and it tried to compensate. And so you definitely get a lot of Ryan Gosling actually doing detective work in this film. That's all great. But again, it's doing that, and it's doing like all this thematic exploration, and the result is a movie that's twice as long as the original.
Yeah, and that's why it's different. It feels more involved in that way. It doesn't feel like a drifty sort of like, okay, we have this basic narrative that you've seen a million times in a million different movies, and here it is in this future sci-fi setting with all these other crazy technological themes behind it. That's what's interesting about the original. And that's probably why I prefer the original, is I prefer that approach, because I found, while this film overall was super satisfying, super engrossing, awesome in almost every way, it got a little convoluted for me. I lost track of a lot. And I was sad about that, because I wanted to keep track of everything feverishly because I was so invested. But man, this thing just throws a million things at you.
The only scene that
it is hard to keep up in the middle to like right before we get to Harrison Ford. Everything after he starts to have his little crisis to that, I got a little lost.
Yeah, the only scene that lost me, because I followed most of it, but the only scene that kind of lost me is when he's in the room looking at like the futuristic microfiche thing, and his, as you call her, cell phone wife is there with him, and he's talking about like there are these two kids, and one was a boy and one was a girl, and one of them died, and all this shit, like all of that, like I wasn't sure, like that kind of lost me. I wasn't sure
Yeah,
all that
so I mean,
exposition. I
we
wasn't
haven't
sure
really
all of
gotten
that.
to the whole plot of this thing yet, but
That was the really the only, and I need to watch the movie and see if I can pick up on what he was talking about in
because
that scene.
the whole idea is they're looking for for the supposed child of a human and a replicant, aka Deckard and Rachel, uh,
Right.
and when he starts to put the pieces together, he finds two DNA matches that are identical, which is, obviously unusual. And one's a boy and one's a girl. And the boy is dead? Or the girl is dead? No, the girl's dead.
He said the girl was dead due to a genetic deficiency, and I think, in hindsight, that that was just a way of covering up because we find out who she is and where she is. I think that having the record show that she's dead was a way for them to cover up so that they could hide her. I don't know then what the boy has to do with any of this. Is this like a Skywalker situation? There is another like what's happening?
Well, did they
You know?
make up that there were twins? That way they could, because I mean they disguised. I mean we find this out. We find out that they disguised the girl. I mean we should also. We didn't say this earlier. I'm going to say it now. We're an hour and 23 minutes in, but I'm going to say this now. We're not going to hold back on spoilers. We're just going to talk about this movie until we stop.
We have kind of been up until now, but that's only because there's a lot to cover.
Yeah. So we're not going to hold back on spoilers. So just don't listen to this if you haven't watched the movie. But
Side note, it's the fucking movie.
yeah, go watch the movie, please do. Go support big budget science fiction that's this intelligent, please.
Deserves time, and I know it takes up a large chunk of time. So definitely, try to schedule, try to eke out some time if you like science fiction, if you like the original, if you just want to look at some pretty images, it's got your back.
Absolutely. So maybe the idea was that they would say that the girl was dead and that the boy was still alive because they disguised her as a boy briefly. We learned that.
Do we?
Yeah.
When do we learn? When do we learn that?
Well, there's remember when we see the dream, we think that the little child, because we learned that Kay's memory about the foundry is hers.
We see a small child in a dream, a small child who is, still at that age where you might not be able to tell, especially since all the kids in that orphanage are dressed the same. I don't think they faked that it was a boy. I just think that we couldn't tell that it
That's the idea. Okay.
Shit.
So I have no idea then. I have no idea why. But that's what they could have tried to do that, is what I'm saying. But we don't know. We have no idea.
It's the exact same twist, and I don't know if this was intended or not, but it's the exact same twist as in The Dark Knight Rises, when it's like, oh, you thought that memory sequence was a boy climbing out of the pit, but it was really Talia al Ghul.
Right. I don't know. I have no idea why that DNA thing was in there then. I don't know why, or not even that it was in there, just why there were two of them. What
Yeah.
Who was the second one?
That's the part that I'm trying to figure out. That's the part that I really need to see this movie again and pay extra attention to.
Because what you think for a while is that maybe there were twins and that there was a girl and a boy, the girl was dead, and that the boy was Kay. That's what you think for a hot minute.
Yeah, well, and at the very end, the chick doesn't know. I mean, she doesn't say that there were twins, though. When the woman that basically explains to Kay that he's not the child, she doesn't. She says straight up, "Oh, it was a girl that we delivered." Like she never says, "Oh, there were two. One was a girl and one was a boy, and one of them died." So I don't.
I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying that in that moment, I think we're supposed to believe that. So that so that way we're like, oh shit, Kay's the one that Kay is his target.
So, fuck it, I'm just going to get into it. Early in the film, after Kay kills Batista, which I was expecting more Batista in this movie. I was surprised that he was only in it at the beginning. His character seemed really interesting, and I would have liked to, to maybe know a little bit more about him. But yeah, he's only in that first scene. That being said, he's really good in that scene and in this short film that we, already talked about. he's really showing that he's got some range, between Drax and this character, and I feel like he gets a couple more good roles that are very diverse under his belt, and I think he can probably surmount The Rock as like the best wrestler turned actor. But anyway, after Ryan Gosling has his scene where he retires the character, whose name I don't know, um, he finds through seemingly just a hunch about this weird tree outside the house. He discovers this box that's been buried, and in the box are the bones of what we find out is Rachel from the first film. The big shocker, though, is that upon examination of the body, it becomes apparent that she died in childbirth. Now, this is very strange because replicants, as far as we've known, have not been capable of reproducing the good old-fashioned way. And it would seem that Tyrell had created her. It seems like she was. We knew in the first film that she was a very experimental model and that she had these false implanted memories. But she also seems to be special in that she secretly was able to reproduce, and that was sort of, Wallace refers to it as Tyrell's final trick. I assume he found out about it through like the old through Tyrell's old notes or whatever, because he bought the company and acquired all of the assets. But so yeah. And you know what? I've noticed the Roy Batty and they're the Nexus 6 generation, and then we skip to Batista's generation, which is Nexus 8, and they never really talk about a Nexus 7. And I'm pretty sure that Rachel, the sort of experimental prototype, is the Nexus 7 because it's in between the 6 and the 8, so it just makes sense to me. Anyway, yeah, so she was pregnant, and we spend the majority of this movie trying to figure out who this kid is. Robin Wright, who does a fantastic job playing the new police chief, who Kay refers to as Madam, she wants it found so that it can be destroyed because she knows that this could upset the entire order that the society is built on. Wallace wants to find it so that he can figure out how to make his replicants capable of reproduction. He hasn't been able to do that himself, and he needs that to be done so that they can reproduce and multiply.
God,
at a
I
rate.
appreciate that so much more watching the short because you get a better sense of why he wants that. Because in the
Right.
actual
Well,
movie,
he
it
says,
just seems like a convenience. Then, like, oh, I'm getting sick of pushing these things out of my big plastic chute. I'd rather if they could
no,
just do that themselves.
there is a line in the film where he talks about, I can only make so many and it's not enough. And he says, we've only colonized 9 planets and we should be conquering the stars.
Oh, that's right.
But
Okay.
he talks about all that.
Mm.
But so yeah, the whole crux of the narrative here is everybody's after this beast. Meanwhile,
Man, I
there's
love that. Did you love that? I loved that. It made this such a better sequel to the original while still being its own thing, kind of. Because that's the detective story. Like in the original, it uses a million other, kind of 40s noirish detective films to get across to use as the basis for the story, and then we dress it up with all these futuristic flourishes. Same thing here. We take some of the plot from the first movie, we make a mystery out of it, and then we tell a character drama around it.
there is a potential downside to it in that it makes Deckard way more important in retrospect than he was in the first movie. Part of the charm of the original film is that Deckard as a character really isn't all that important in the grand scheme of things, and you almost feel as if we could be witnessing the same events through any character's eyes, you know. And it just feels more real in that way because it's just this small story about this guy who falls into this weird situation. So by having him be like the father of this potential replicant savior who could lead a rebellion, conquest, Planet of the Apes style, certainly gives him a greater importance to the mythos that wasn't there originally. But as far as using his relationship with Rachel from the first film and this huge thing that he did that went against everything that he was supposed to do, using that as the impetus for this entire sequels plot and this huge thing that's happening, it makes a lot of sense as well. So so there's a downside and an upside to it.
I think it's fun because the original movie still exists on its own, where he is this unimportant guy because he does it after the first movie. And I mean, I guess unless the kid was conceived when they have sex, The first time?
Could be. I didn't think about that, but it could be. It could have been conceived in that weird, almost rapey scene in his apartment.
Yeah. But we don't know. But I would imagine that happened after.
Mm.
Maybe not. Maybe she was already pregnant. Maybe she knew she was already
Well,
pregnant.
no, we know the date that it was born. It was actually the release date of this movie, but it was in the year 2020 something, like 2021 maybe. What was that date that Ryan Gosling kept looking at? You know, the one that was on the bottom of his horse and on the base of the tree. That's the date that the kid was born. So I don't think it could have been conceived during the event.
2021. Yeah, you're right. I'm remembering that now. So yes, it must have been
Conceived
conceived
in
a
late
considerable amount of time after the first movie.
2 years later, late 2020, and then come around in or no, sometime in 2020, 2021, in that area, it must have been conceived. Um, yeah, so there are three factions throughout the whole movie. The police who want to destroy it, the Wallace Corporation who basically want to dissect it so they can figure out how to reproduce their own replicants, and there's also the underground movement of older model replicants from the Tyrell days who are planning this big rebellion and who want to keep the child safe so that eventually she can lead them in this, sort of, again, conquest of the Planet of the Apes thing. Those are your three factions. And meanwhile, Ryan Gosling goes against all of them and decides instead to reunite the child with Harrison Ford by the end.
Right. And you can question whether or not he's a sappy fuck, or if he ultimately did the right thing, or if it even matters. Because does he even matter? Because he's just a fucking toy soldier. Oh, it's so
Well,
good. It's so
well,
good.
as Queen once said, nothing really matters. Anyone can see. But
It's so good though, isn't it, Dylan?
it
Like
is.
just
It
the
is.
way they set this up. I love it so much. Oh, I love the way it comes together at the end. Just the the different ways that things relate that didn't seem like they were going to relate earlier on.
Yeah, and I was really glad that Ryan Gosling turned out not to be the kid, because again,
Yes, me too.
for a large portion of this film, he thinks he's Harrison Ford's son. And at first, when they pointed in that direction, I was like, "Oh, that's the big idea you had for the
I was
sequel."
like,
I mean, I
oh,
get.
so it's Indiana Jones 4 again, but with Blade Runners, and
I,
better, but still.
I was like, I guess if that's the way you want to go, and then right about you know, then when he actually meets Harrison Ford and they start interacting and they have the dynamic, I started to make peace with it. I was like, all right, that might be a cheap, obvious twist to put in your movie. But no, they're really selling it. I like the execution. And then bam, they whip it on its head, and they're like, you're not his kid. His kid was a girl.
Oh
And it,
man. And then she's just like, in a way, we all wish that we all think that we are the one. What do they call it? It's called the one, isn't it? Or is it the
I'm pretty,
Matrix?
I'm pretty sure she said, I think we all wish that we were the one. I think she does say the one.
That
I'm
is
not sure.
definitely the Matrix, though. I don't know why they made the big prophet character the same. That was
I was
that
like,
was a nice moment to shove the blade in though. Right? Like he just had the crap kicked out of him. His whole world has been rocked upside down. Uh, and she's just like, we all thought we were you. Like that's so good. And you know what that is? This whole movie, like, it gets somewhat meta in the sense of, because Ryan Gosling is a replicant, we can somewhat deconstruct the concept of a protagonist in a film because he's not really a real person and all of his motivations and actions can be questioned because he may have been programmed to do them with somebody else's memories or totally constructed memories.
yeah.
It's
Well,
good
the other
stuff.
thing is,
And that was the moment that I really felt that way because everybody is the protagonist of their own story. That's something that you hear a lot. And in a film like this where it's almost entirely from Ryan Gosling's point of view, we don't spend a lot of time away from his viewpoint on the world and his little sphere of influence. we sort of forget that there's this whole world of other replicants out there. It's not all about his little personal conflicts and his little dreams and desires and his little cell phone wife. There's this whole fucking world of people out there with all these problems and these sort of people with even worse problems. So, I don't know. I thought that was really good and a nice little deconstruction of that whole idea.
Yeah, and the other big kick in the nuts about that whole revelation is that it means he didn't have to do any of this shit. If he hadn't gotten this idea in his head that he was the kid he was searching for, in a way, if he hadn't let cell phone wife get into his head by saying, "Oh, you're special. I always knew you were special." If he hadn't listened to her and just gone on with the job, he probably would have eventually figured it out, and he could have just carried out the mission that was given to him.
Yeah, he totally fucking burns every possible bridge, don't he?
Yeah, he fucked up his whole life inadvertently. And it's not that it's that great of a life anyway.
I mean, he's a replicant, so if anything, I think when
he lives in the apartment and everybody hates him because he's a replicant.
I think that when he lays down on those steps at the end and the snow's melting on his hand, that is the representation of somebody who is totally satisfied with how they went out. And that's why I feel like the ending is interesting because I think it's somewhat selfish for him.
We've gotten 3 of those this year. We've gotten 3 of that kind of death scene, now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's very Logan. What was the other one?
Wolverine, Caesar, and Kay all got to go out in that, same fashion.
Yeah, Caesar's is very... Yeah, Caesar is... They all like, all right, my job is done. Yeah. But Logan's is very selfless. That's the whole point of that movie. Caesar, same deal. He's all about, I must provide the pillar of my civilization because I am the only one who can do it. I don't know how I feel about what Kay did, and I think I'm glad I mean, it's a Blade Runner. We should be having these kind of debates about the ending in our heads, but it's selfish completely because it's just there so he can have that little feeling when he goes out. He didn't do anything that's gonna be better for any other replicant or any other person. He did that.
I feel like it was done because I don't think it was just done so that he could feel good at the end. I think that was a nice little bonus. I think it was because, again, he's going against all of these factions that want him to operate in their interests. He goes against all of them in the end because he doesn't agree with any of their methods. Well,
I also think he wants to carve his own path.
He stops the Wallace Corp from taking Deckard off world so that they can torture him for information. He doesn't kill the child like his boss does, even though he lies and tells her that he did to put her mind at ease and get her off the scent. But the other big one is, the replicants, the underground replicant resistance movement want him to kill Deckard so that he can't be, tortured for information. They're like, take him out so that the Wallace Corp can't get to him and get the information out of him. And he goes against them too. He doesn't want to do any of those things.
I like that.
I think he's a character who's fed up with taking orders. He takes what Batista said at the beginning of the movie about how he says the newer models are only happy doing whatever they're told because they've never seen a miracle. And then he spends the whole movie sort of, having his world opened up and rocked in ways that he never expected. And by the end, he decides, I'm going to be like Batista. I'm not going to, do what I've been told by any of them, not even the other replicants. I'm going to fucking decide for myself how this ends.
I'm going to carve my own path, find my humanity. Yeah. But again, it's all about, I'm not going to say it's all about him, but it kind of is. It's all about satisfying his own needs. What I think is less selfish about it is...
Oh, by the way, that was one annoying thing that I didn't really care for. That they decided to do through the editing. And every now and then, Ryan Gosling will realize something, and then we'll cut to something that somebody said to him earlier, so that it's supposed to make it clearer to the audience what he's understood. But I really didn't need it,
Yeah, it's a 3-hour movie. Please don't do that.
Like the one I'm thinking of, he realizes about like the replicant giving birth, and then we cut back to Batista saying the line about "You've never seen a miracle." It's like, yeah, I remember him saying that in the movie.
I was watching the movie earlier. Yeah, I don't need to see that again.
You want me to show me that again? The original movie does that one time when Deckard picks up the unicorn and he remembers what Gaff said to him earlier, but you don't cut back to it. It's still like new imagery.
Right. Yeah, in the first movie, there's like next to none of that. So, and that's a more traditional detective story. So you would expect there to maybe be more. I don't know. I didn't care for that myself, but it didn't leap out to me as much. What I was gonna say though was Kay's whole thing is a little less selfish because you could say he's also doing it for Harrison Ford and for his daughter. So
Yeah, I guess that,
satisfying those that personal relationship is perhaps more important than any social means that the girl could be used for.
yeah, because I also get the sense that even though he didn't wind up being Harrison Ford's son, I think by that point in the story, he still sort of looks up to him in kind of a fatherly type of capacity, you know, because I think he had gotten used to the idea that he was his son, and he had sort of gotten to know him a little bit. And I think by the end, he still sort of sees him as like this father figure that he never actually had.
Even though he had shot him.
Yeah, even though he had
He
shot him.
spends the whole movie nursing a bullet wound from his would-be father figure. Not the whole
But
movie, like the last third of it.
long enough to be not a whole movie.
No, it was like 45 minutes. I mean, Harrison Ford shows up in this thing super far in. Should we get
Yeah,
into
and that's
that
something
now, or is there other stuff we want to talk about now?
Well, we can go ahead and get into it. That's one
Yeah,
thing that I've heard.
let's do it. Let's talk about Ford.
That's one thing that I have heard people complain about, that you basically spend 2 hours waiting to get to Harrison Ford, and then once you get to him, he's not in the movie that
Again,
much.
what movie are these people watching?
What are they expecting, though? Like, this is not Harrison Ford's movie. I understand that the trailer gave you the idea that it would be, or at least that it would be more of a buddy cop thing between the two of them. That's kind of what
That
I
criticism I
went
can see based on the marketing, yeah.
Yeah, but it's by the time you're sitting there watching the movie, you know, even like 20 minutes in, you should be able to tell, oh, this is definitely Ryan Gosling's movie, and whatever Harrison Ford does in it is going to be in a very sort of, again, it's Force Awakens again. He's there in sort of like a custodial capacity. He's there to sort of shepherd the new character through their journey.
He's a way bigger deal in The Force Awakens, though. He has more screen time. Is it more screen time at the very least?
I was about to say, he literally planted the seed of everything that happened in this movie, so I don't know if I would say
he's more screen time, is what I meant.
although I guess he technically did in that movie too, because he also has...
Yeah, he also had a child who was not... I mean, Kylo Ren is not like the whole end-all, be-all thing in that movie. Luke is.
Maybe two? We'll find out. But, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I did not spend the whole time waiting to get to Harrison Ford. In fact, when we started to build to that, I was like, oh yeah, he's in this movie, right? Because I was so invested.
I did feel myself about halfway through go, wow, Harrison Ford hasn't shown up yet. He's not going to be as much of this movie as I expected. But that's literally as far as my thought process went. Never was I like, that fucking sucks. I wanted more Harrison Ford. No, but when he shows up, for what little time he shows up for, he's on point. Like, this is some solid acting from her. This is some of the best acting Harrison Ford's done in recent memory. Especially, you know, the scene that really comes to mind is when Ryan Gosling is asking him the questions about, like, God, like, why didn't you stick around for your child's birth and all that shit. That's...
My job was to leave. Oh, Harrison Ford acted his ass off. He looked amazing, too. They gave him the Rick Deckard haircut. He's
great.
He's in good shape.
I don't know why he was beekeeping. I don't know what that was supposed to represent, but
that was bizarre. I thought that was supposed to be a reference to Sherlock Holmes, because that's what Sherlock Holmes did when he retired. But I thought that was super vague. But that's what I took that as a reference to.
Interesting.
That's a cliche for people who retire. They go off and they keep bees, and that comes from Sherlock Holmes stories from back in the day. That's what he did. I don't know why, but that's the cliche that's been built up after.
Instead, they should retire and then range the fuck out of a park. That would be good.
Do you remember that moment in not Time of the Doctor, Name of the Doctor, where the Doctor is like, I always thought I would go off retire and keep bees? That's also a reference to that Sherlock Holmes story.
Oh yeah, maybe that's just like a British thing. Maybe old British people, that's what they like. You know, people in America, they get old, they move to Florida and like eat McDonald's until they die. But maybe in England,
the American dream.
Maybe in England, they walk around wearing fucking polos and keeping bees when they're old.
Why is that Harrison Ford's thing? He's not British.
No, but maybe it's just become like a pop culture thing. I'm just saying
Yeah,
maybe
well,
that's
it
what
absolutely has. Yeah,
I'm just saying maybe that's why that's what Sherlock Holmes did. Maybe that's like a deeper cultural thing that we're just not
perhaps,
aware of.
perhaps. I mean, that just strikes me as I'm Sherlock Holmes and I'm eccentric, so this is I'm gonna do something weird.
That being said, that is something that could have been cut. I don't think we would have lost anything from this movie. We've been talking a little bit about how this movie is a little bit overly long, and yeah, you know what? They could totally cut like 20, 30 minutes out of this movie and not miss anything, because all they would have to cut out is like people walking around and, establishing shots. And I don't even mean cut these things out completely, but you could just trim them a little here and there and easily lose 15, 20 minutes out of the movie. It's, you know,
I don't know where you would cut. I don't have that problem with it. I just think it's too convoluted in the middle. I don't think it's too long, and I don't. And if I do feel that way, I just don't know what you would cut, because I feel like
see, and I'm not a person who minds a long movie. I don't even watch the
no, I know.
theatrical. I don't even watch the theatrical cuts of Lord of the Rings anymore. I go for the extended edition. But again, there's just a lot of because there were a lot of great establishing shots in the original Blade Runner too, but
That's
there are
yeah. I
so
was gonna
many,
say.
but there are so many more in this. And like I'll give you a prime example. Ryan Gosling gets to Las Vegas and he's walking around for a solid, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes before we finally get to Harrison Ford. And yeah, certainly have him walking around. But you could certainly trim those up a little bit, especially when he's out. Well, once he gets into the building, and he's like looking at the piano and everything, that's fine. But especially when he's like outside, I don't need to see him, stumbling around the desert and looking at bees and
You think we just pushed the establishing of tension too far there?
giant lesbian statues that I'm not sure if actually existed in Las Vegas.
That reminded me of like fucking the Never-Ending Story when he goes through the fucking statues with the big tits.
Yeah, it's just little things like that, that I think it's not necessarily that I think it needs a lot of cutting. I think that there should have been some trimming,
Sure,
some weeding, if you will.
I can see that definitely. I mean, like I said, I thought it was convoluted in parts, and I definitely felt a little exhausted towards the middle. But
Because where it's not a problem, it's not a problem because of just length. Because again, I'm not a person who minds a long movie. Some people are, and if you don't like a long movie, then that's fine. That's perfectly valid. But it's not a problem because it makes the movie longer. It's a problem because the pace kind of drops to a fucking halt at times. It gets really, 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 really slow sometimes.
it
Yeah.
stops being a story and starts being like uh, a moving wallpaper on a computer screen.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Not all the time. Not all the time. I mean, I wouldn't lose much from this movie. I'm just saying the pacing at points could be, improved. 2 hours, nearly 3 hours long. I feel like 2.5 would have been more apt.
Totally, I can totally see that without a doubt.
Uh,
Maybe we even spend. I don't know if I don't even know if I would cut any of this because I loved this so much. Maybe we spend too much time with Cell Phone Wife towards the beginning, establishing all that. Because yes, she's important to the film, but plot wise, what she actually does for the story happens later. So that's all
right.
there for setup. So I would almost say, even though I love all that, that's all like really good social commentary. You could almost cut that for story stuff, but again, the social commentary there is so biting and so good, I wouldn't touch it.
I'll give you an example, and this is not a scene that I would want them to cut because I like it. It's weird. I like it. Um, but I'm saying that you could make an argument for it. You don't really need the sex scene.
No, you don't. I was literally thinking the same thing, but it's really impactful though. Yeah, that's where the social commentary comes through.
It's really great.
Interestingly, but yeah, I don't know if you need it.
And it's really great thematically. Like, I
Yep.
like the fact in the first movie, replicants tried to connect to their humanity through memories and like photographs and things like that, and that's all still here. But they added this other layer of like physical connection. You know, at one point, Ryan Gosling is actually propositioned by a pleasure model. Instead of just Pris was said to be a pleasure model, but then we didn't see her doing anything all that pleasurable. You know, there's more of an emphasis on that sort of thing. There's all kinds of sex and nudity just like in the background of this world that sort of ties into this theme, and so it's there for that reason. That's the problem. Again, this is a movie that tries to have its cake and eat it too, in that it tries to do all of that really cool exploration into the world like Blade Runner did, the first movie. But what the first movie knew is that if we're going to spend time doing that, then we can't spend as much time on the actual plot. And that's why Blade Runner, the first film, is very well served by the fact that it has a very simple story.
Yes.
This tries to do all of that shit while also being far bigger and more complex. And that's why you have just so much shit, and it's all good, and you don't really want to cut any of it, but at the same time, it's a lot,
I completely agree. It's a little too dense in places. You just feel a little overwhelmed and a little exhausted. I would definitely agree.
I feel like it's a movie that wishes it was a book.
Yeah, I can see that. Maybe that's because the original Blade Runner was adapted from a book, and it knew exactly what to take out and what to leave in. This is a sequel to a thing that was adapted from a book and wholly original content. So maybe it's almost not and this is not really an apt word, but overcompensating for not being a book, being based on a book originally, but because this is a new story set in this universe, we have to get so much of it out there. I mean, think about it. We made 3 short films to build up to it. There was a lot of content that Denny wanted to get out about this thing.
Exactly.
So,
and those 3 films just there to like explain the timeline. The movie only has like text at the beginning to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and then they also all do that, include all the short films. Do they all have the text at the beginning? I don't. No, not the second two. The first one does.
2022. The second two did this interesting thing where like they would start with from the act or like a little snippet of the actual movie that like tied into what they were doing in the short. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then they would go into the short proper.
Yeah, I noticed that.
But yeah, the anime one opened much more traditionally. Again, it feels almost like the original film. It opens with like the shot of the Tyrell building from the distance and the flames shooting. Yeah, and the text explaining what's been going on in the 3 years since the original film.
Replicants, words in red. That's always important.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. But so just to get back to Harrison Ford, I like it when he shows up and he acts, because he doesn't always. He can so easily just go back into his. We haven't seen that Harrison Ford in a couple of years. I haven't seen the Harrison Ford in quite a while. Every Harrison Ford that I have seen since Force Awakens has been on point. Hi, I'm Harrison Ford, and I am excited to be here. And man, it's good to see.
I think the last Harrison Ford that I saw, well, it was when he gave that speech when he was presenting whatever that award was at the Oscars a few years back.
Fuck, that's right.
But the last time I saw it in a movie was probably Indiana Jones 4. I think he could tell that the movie he was making wasn't that great.
I mean, he's made stuff after that where where it's exactly the same performance. So if you'd seen any of that stuff, you would agree. But the last thing he made that really got him into this new mindset that he's in is Force Awakens.
Yeah, well, Harrison Ford is the kind of person, he doesn't bullshit, and so you can tell when he doesn't give a fuck about what he's doing. I mean, we saw that in the first Blade Runner in the theatrical cut with that god awful
narration,
narration that they put over everything. It was bad narration dialogue. He knew it was bad, and he didn't make any attempt to elevate it. He was like, what's this shit I gotta read?
I barely even know how to read now.
It's kind of like
gonna have my assistant read it to me.
Some actors are that way. They can't force themselves to care about something, and so they have to sort of phone it in. I mean, Marlon Brando was that way. He's kind of phoning it in through Superman. Or Orson Welles famously talking about his role in Transformers. Oh, I play a toy.
They described it as a toy that attacked other toys to him, which is not inaccurate.
No, it's fairly accurate.
That's probably the best description of Unicron I've ever heard. A toy who attacks other toys. What's Ryan Gosling in Blade Runner 2049? A toy that attacks other toys.
or a doll might be a better way of
Yeah, a
putting it.
doll or an
Given
angel. An angel is how they're described in the film. Uh, that was very Evangelion. I've given birth to an angel.
well, that ties into Wallace's way of speaking. You know, again,
He's an Evangelion character. You're right.
his very biblical way of describing himself and what he does, because he believes that he has this sort of higher purpose. Not to say that he's religious, but that he uses metaphors frequently.
Yeah, Tyrell wasn't like that. He wasn't all into the God metaphor.
No, you kind of got it anyway. He didn't have to spell it out for you.
No,
You just got it. You just got it
he
because
was just a dude. That's what I liked about him so much. He was just as surprised as the rest of us when Roy Batty showed up at his house. That's what was so cool about that.
Again, you got the godlike sense from him just from who he was in the story and the way he was treated. The scenes where Roy Batty is like riding this elevator into the sky and coming to this opulent gold palace that he lived in. That's where sort of the god metaphors come from for Tyrell. He doesn't have to sit around making speeches about like, I'm a god.
And that's not to say that Jared Leto's character is bad for that. No, it's just
different.
different.
It's just a different approach, and it just goes into how Wallace is meant to be a more villainous force, and because he has this megalomaniacal.
Driven.
Yeah, it's because he has this megalomaniacal sort of almost supernatural view of himself.
In the original film, Roy Batty almost kind of had that, where he has this view on himself and on his life that he feels he has to get out to the rest of the world, and that's what drives him to do the things that he's going to do. He's driven.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. It's more like
no, I mean Roy Batty's not a villain either.
Well, no, but I'm saying it's not exactly the same kind of a mindset. I mean, Roy Batty has always struck me as a character who has like the soul of a poet, and he sort of his is a much more existential lamentation on the fact that he's going to die and all the things he's seen are going to be lost to history. It's less of a selfish thing and more of or not even less selfish, but it's less grandiose than
it's more one-to-one, more personal.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, that's what we can say about the original Blade Runner versus 2049.
Yeah, which is why I prefer it. Just smaller scale, more intimate.
I'm really curious if we could resurrect Philip K. Dick, and
that would be interesting. I mean, he never saw the original in full.
No, first of all, put him in a fucking park or something because people don't want to see a corpse walking around. But take him to a theater.
Put him in a poncho at the very.
Take him to a theater.
Just fucking a wheelchair, big hat, sunglasses. Does he have a ticket? No, he doesn't need one. Trust me, you don't even want to ask. All right.
Look like fucking David and Jack from American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I really wonder how he would feel about this film because it's a whole sequel that he had never envisioned, and it ties into this different approach that Ridley had to the replicants on the first film.
He's just constantly using the fucking paddles off a fucking the thing he used to shock. I can't think of my words are losing me. The thing they used to shock a heart. What the hell's that called?
Oh yeah, the defibrillator.
Defibrillator kit. That's right. It's just constantly shocking him back to life throughout the film.
Yeah, but
just sitting in
no, but I talked about when we reviewed the first Blade Runner on DFOS how he and Ridley Scott had very different approaches to the replicants and how they interpreted replicants and what a replicant. Well, he didn't even call them replicants, but you know what I mean. How what they meant thematically. Their approaches were completely different. Ridley Scott very much saw them as these angelic creatures, and Philip K. Dick had originally designed them to be like robo-Nazis, essentially. So very different approaches. So I wonder how he would feel about this sequel, which basically took that original idea that Ridley had, he disagreed with, and kind of runs with it and expands on it to the nth degree.
Right. I don't know. I'd be very interested to know how he would see it. I'd be super interested to see how he views a replicant Blade Runner.
I'm also interested to know how his surviving family members feel about the new film. That would be very interesting to find out. Uh,
There is that new series coming out, Electric Dreams. That's like an anthology series based on his work. Are you interested in that?
I had not heard about that. That sounds interesting. I keep meaning to watch
Steve Buscemi's in it. He's in part of it at the very least. I mean, it's an anthology series, so.
I kept meaning to watch that series that was an Amazon or Hulu, but was based on one of his other books, Man in the High Castle. I want to say it was Amazon.
No,
Um,
I think that's Hulu.
is it?
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's Hulu.
Hmm,
Because I think Electric Dreams is Hulu. I could be wrong.
interesting.
I don't know, man. I don't watch movies or TV. uh,
Yeah, Harrison Ford's really good in this.
yes, he is. He's very good in this.
What I'm trying to say here. And
He's got a dog. Is it real? Doesn't matter.
No, that was a really great line in the movie because it pretty much summed up what both of these films are about. Ryan Gosling says, "Is that a real dog?" Or he just says, "Is that real?" And Harrison Ford just goes, "I don't know. Ask him."
Oh, that's the line, right?
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about Harrison Ford, and this is really the big elephant in the room. I was so concerned going into this movie. And this was something that I kept saying up until the day that I went to the theater. They better not do this thing. And they didn't. I was so concerned going into the movie that they were going to come down definitely on the subject of whether or not Deckard is a replicant. And, fuck what Ridley Scott says. Even fuck what Hampton Fancher says. They're both of opposite opinions on the matter. Ridley Scott says he's a replicant. Hampton Fancher says he's not. The point, to me, the original film, even though personally I don't see him as a replicant, but the point
No, me neither.
of the original film, the point of the original film to me is that it's left ambiguous. And if you come down either way on the subject in the new film, you ruin it. You piss that away. You say, ambiguity out the window. That would be even worse to me than taking this character that wasn't supposed to be important in the first film and making him important later. That would be even worse, to retroactively ruin what the first film did by coming out and giving us a definite answer. And thankfully they do not.
I mean,
There are two
he seems to be human.
there are two scenes in this movie that broach the topic because they couldn't not broach the topic. It's all people ever fucking talk about when it comes to Blade Runner. So they definitely had to address it. There are two scenes in the movie that broach the topic quite tastefully, I might add, that Deckard may or may not be a replicant. There's, first of all, a scene that surprised me. I was not expecting good old Gaff.
We gotta talk about a couple of cameos in this.
Yeah, I was not expecting the dear old Gaff from the first film to show up in this movie. That was amazing. And I loved that he made an origami sheep, which is a callback, of course, to the original novel.
The
to
electric sheep.
Electric sheep, yes.
Man, we really feel like we're in the same world in that moment. Ryan Gosling goes to see him. Like, fuck.
It was also just good to see Edward James Olmos. I don't think I've seen him in a movie in a while. I know him from Blade Runner and that movie where he teaches math to inner city kids. That's pretty much it.
Wasn't there a line where he was like, "Did you bring me cigars?" It's like, no, I don't think they make those anymore. I don't think they'd let me in if I had those. It's like, oh,
yeah, I think
fuck
that
you.
was. I think that was a line. By the way, a lot of people have been saying, why wasn't he using city speak? Because in the original movie, he talks a lot of city speak. Apparently, that was up to Edward James Olmos, and he made the decision to just talk normal English. I would assume it's because he's fucking old and probably doesn't remember how to do city speak. But it was just great to see him back, and he slipped back into that role, even if he wasn't using the language, the city speak. He just embodied it. He felt like the same guy. 30 some odd years older. It was great. But the line he has in that scene that sort of brings up the idea that maybe Deckard could be a replicant is that he says he wasn't long for this world. And Ryan Gosling asked him, what do you mean by that? And he said there was something in his eyes. Now, if you are a fan of the idea that he is a replicant, then you would take that to mean the Nolan effect, that the original Nexus replicants have when you look at their eyes. When the light hits it a certain way, their eyes would reflect gold. However, if you prefer the theory that Deckard is not a replicant, then you could interpret that statement in numerous other ways. I personally interpreted it as meaning like compassion. He was too compassionate for the replicants that he was supposed to be retiring. That was sort of his big failing as a Blade Runner. in the first film. So you could interpret that statement from Edward James Olmos either way. But also, I just found out that Edward James Olmos is apparently going to be in next year's Predator movie, so that sounds awesome.
Oh, that movie is just like that sounds like the greatest thing ever on every front.
Yeah, I just also remember that he was the dad in that Jennifer Lopez movie, Selena, about the sing that shot. Anyway,
my favorite movie. No,
so that was great.
I've actually seen it. It's fine.
I've seen that movie several times over the course of my life because my grandmother loved that movie, and it is a thoroughly fine biopic about a singer that I have never listened to. So,
there's your review of Selena. Anyway, Blade Runner.
Jennifer Lopez is good in it. Anyway,
in Blade Runner, no.
I wish. No.
Nah, yeah. So what should we move on to now?
There's actually a movie that Jennifer Lopez is in where Michael Keaton plays the same detective that he played Jackie Brown. I can't remember what it was. Anyway.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't know what the movie's called. What a fucking weird bit of continuity. Wasn't that just because they were based on the same book or something?
Well, they were based on books from the same author that both featured that character, and they decided just to use the same actor. So technically that movie takes place in Tarantino world, I guess.
It's weird. Doesn't he act very different, too? Because in the Tarantino movie, he's like a fucking obnoxious cockstain. And then in the other movie, he's like a serious cop.
You should review Jackie Brown at some point. I fucking love that movie.
I already have.
That's right, you have.
I mean,
fuck that.
Anyway, so
what was I? Oh yeah, I was trying to get to the other scene that hints at the idea that he might be a replicant, which is in this big confrontational scene that we will have to talk more about in a minute because something else big happens in it. But there's a moment when basically Harrison Ford meets Jared Leto's character, and Jared Leto suggests the possibility that maybe Deckard is a replicant and maybe he was actually programmed to fall in love with Rachel and that all of this was planned from the beginning by Tyrell. He doesn't say for sure that that's what happened. He merely raises the possibility, and that was great. So both of those scenes, give something to both sides of the debate.
Yeah, but he says something where he's like, "Oh, that sounds ridiculous," though.
I like it because it sort of honors both sides of the debate. People who think he's a replicant now have things in the movie that they can point to be like, aha. And people who don't think he's a replicant can point to those very same scenes and say, no, I interpret it this way. And people like me who prefer the ambiguity are just fucking happy that they didn't say so.
I loved all that. But man, I loved the rest of that scene just as much.
Yeah, so kind of, sort of Sean Young cameo in the movie.
She was on set, right?
She was on set, from what I understand. It was a different actress, but I guess they had Sean Young on set. I don't know if they used her so that they could... Basically, they Tarkined Rachel. By Tarkined, I mean, of course, recreating a character through C. They had a new replicant who was made to look like Rachel that Jared Leto uses to tempt Deckard into giving him information, and Deckard sees right through it. Actually, Jared Leto makes a big mistake. Apparently, Rachel had green eyes, and how fucking great is it that the blind guy?
I didn't think about that until you just mentioned that, but that's really funny.
Gets the eye color wrong. Like it's perfect. That's the mistake that he made.
It's such a minor genetic thing too that it makes sense that could be screwed up.
Yeah. Oh, I also thought it was great that and I don't know if this was intentional, but in the last film, Tyrell gets blinded. We literally see Roy Batty plunge his thumbs through Tyrell's eyes as he's crushing his skull. And then when we jump ahead to this movie, the new Tyrell, for all intents and purposes, is a blind dude.
Huh. He can't be blinded by his lack of foresight because he's already blinded.
But
and it's not like he dies in this like Tyrell does. We don't know what the hell happens to him. Presumably he's
fine.
He
doesn't. There's some setup in this movie. There is some setup in this movie for a possible third, and I don't think we're going to get it based on the box office. But there is some setup. You have this underground resistance movement.
Right. Yep.
And then you also have the fact that the bad guy gets away. Well, one of them does. We haven't even talked about Love.
I forgot about her. Yep.
I don't know how
Let's
you
talk.
said she was.
So, but the Rachel thing is really good. It stresses line though. That's where you're verging into. Oh, this is a sequel to an '80s movie, so we have to have references to the original. There was also like snippets of the original played in audio in the film. Like we heard a little bit of Deckard and Rachel's original meeting.
Yeah, I was only all right with that because that's sort of the whole thing that Ryan Gosling was investigating
Yeah,
anyway.
it's a detective thing. That was fine.
Basically, what's happened is that since he ran away at the end of the first film, Harrison Ford has sort of been covering his tracks, and he's left this sort of spider web of clues all over the place, and Ryan Gosling spends the whole movie unraveling it.
Uh, but I think actually having Rachel appear on screen as if nothing, exactly as she did in 1982, except with different eyes, that's a risk. Not only is it a risk, you got to ask, is it done for a reason? And yeah, I think of all the different criticisms you could try to come up with against it. It's just a really good scene to show the lack of, just the total lack of any kind of personality that Wallace gives to these things. Because, Harrison goes, her eyes were green, and he, smiles to himself, goes, oh, I won. And then Wallace is like, oh, my fault. He just fucking shoots him in the head. Shoots Rachel in the head. Cause
Yeah.
she's disposable. He can make another one. Who cares? So,
Yeah.
ugh, that's good stuff. But again, that was definitely a risk. Because I think a lot of the audience at that point could have gone, oh, so now we're just making a dumb reference-y kind of movie. Now there's a novelty.
Hmm.
But I didn't feel that way about it. I felt like we were still exploring themes there and telling stories, so I really liked all that. You were gonna go to another place though before we got into Rachel. What was it exactly? I'm trying to remember.
Well, I had just mentioned that we haven't really talked about Love yet, and she's kind of a big
Oh,
deal.
right. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about her.
So Jared Leto, despite being the villain, big bad, is not in much of this movie. I think he's in like 2 scenes, extended scenes. It's not like he has no screen time, but
And
he's
he's
not
the
in
primary thing in those scenes.
right. But he's not in a whole lot of the film. Uh, the main antagonist, or the antagonist that we spend most of the movie with, is this replicant that works directly under him named Love, played by Sylvia Hooks, I think her name is. And basically you get a sense that she's sort of the cream of the crop. She's like his favorite or whatever. And she has this, as we find out near the end, this obsessive need to be like the best replicant. Uh, and so and I think that's a part of probably how he programs them to be so obedient. He probably just programs them with this desire to fulfill all of their tasks to be like the best replicant or whatever. That might be the secret. But anyway, she is a fucking badass, and she makes a really great antagonist throughout the film. I think my favorite scene with her is when Ryan Gosling gets into a street with some scavengers, and then all of a sudden they just start blowing up, and you realize that she is sitting in her office back in the city getting her fucking nails done, and she's just drone striking these scavengers with her fucking like glasses. Like she's got like this Google Glass thing, and she can see the battlefield, and she's just saying fire, fire, move 30 degrees west, fire. Like she's just raining down
Yeah,
destruction.
that was also some good social commentary. I liked all that as well. That was my favorite bit with her. I thought she was okay. She didn't stick out to me as much as she did to you. I just thought she was kind of she felt like a Bond henchman, which cool, but I could have used some more dimension for her. In a Blade Runner movie with a clearer set of heroes and villains, she felt like one of the clearer villains to me. But I didn't even get that sense of like, oh, she wanted so desperately to be the best replicant. That didn't stick out to me as much. I wish it had. I probably would have
Well, it's said in dialogue. At the end of the movie, when she's having the fight with Ryan Gosling, there's a moment where she thinks she's killed him. You know, she's like, I don't remember, I don't remember exactly how it went down, but he went down under the water, and she thought that she had killed him, and then she goes back into the car to get Deckard, and he comes back out after she thinks that she's won. She's sort of standing there in the rain and the waves and everything. She has this like moment of triumph, and she says, I'm the best," or something. I forget the exact line, but she straight up says it. Um, and
Oh,
so
I
that's
forgot about that.
and so that's how we know that that's like her whole deal.
Well, I don't know if you can extrapolate that out to her whole deal in that moment, but I like it in that moment because there are two replicants who are made to fight and to be physical and to do a physical thing. You know, he's supposed to go out there and retire other replicants, and she's protecting Wallace and doing Wallace's dirty work. So I guess on a one-to-one level, they're comparable, so she outdoes him on that level. But I kind of wish there was more to her than just that. I don't know where you could have put it. It's a 3-hour movie, but I wish there was more to her.
Right.
She
As
didn't.
as an antagonist, as you know, as the person who has to actually go out and do the dirty work, um, she does really well. I also really like the scene between her and Robin Wright, which poor Robin Wright can't live through a movie this year. I'm really glad that Janae is getting more work these days since House of Cards took off. But man, she can't live through a fucking movie. Um, she was also really good in this movie. Everybody's really good in this movie, but she's got like a few really nice scenes where she's talking with Ryan Gosling, and you really get a sense of what she's about.
You
Uh,
know, I really liked the scene where she forces him to tell him one of his memories. I really liked her, and she seems to have like this almost. She almost leans on Kay as a crutch, almost because he's so reliable that she's just the only one I can count on. This
right,
replicant.
and she has this line where she says, "Sometimes I forget you're a replicant," because she says, "I've dealt with so many," you know.
Right.
And I think that's very telling. That's another line that really plays into the themes of the piece, both pieces really.
Yeah, just I mean, both movies are really about: is there any difference? If there is a difference, does it matter between being a human and being a replicant? That's what it's all about. And this movie gets into it in such detail, even more than the original. That I think on that level alone, it's just worth watching, and why it was worth going back to as a concept, because there's so much to say about creating artificial people and using them, like machines. You know.
Definitely.
So just on that level alone, this was worth it. But Dylan, we are approaching a review about as long as this movie. So
I knew this one was probably going to go long because there's a lot to say, and we covered the shorts.
yeah,
Yeah.
so but I do think we should start to wrap up. So what else do you want to say?
Well, we haven't talked about the chick who actually is the child of
That's
Deckard.
true. That's true. That is one major component that we have neglected to discuss. So why don't we get into that now then?
So there's
Yeah.
a great scene while he's doing his detective work, and at this point, Ryan Gosling already thinks that he might be the child. He wants to make sure that this memory he has is a real memory and not just an implant. So he goes to the woman who actually produces all of the false memories, and we actually get to see how that's done, and it's really cool
Oh, it
stuff.
was so cool.
I don't know how
She's
that
got
little
her little
device.
she's got her little Canon fucking lens that's also like a digital manipulator.
Yeah, I don't know how that thing is supposed to work, but the results are really fascinating. But he goes to her, and he finds out that the memory is real. And in hindsight, she kind of gives away the fact that it's actually her memory that he's looking at, but she does it in such a way that when you're watching the movie the first time, you don't know that that's what she's saying. She starts crying, and she says, "This is a real memory. Somebody lived this." What she doesn't come out and say is, "It was me. It was awful." You know,
Right, because what she said earlier in that scene was that every artist puts a piece of themselves in their work when she's describing the birthday party.
yeah. She
Uh,
also says using real memories is illegal, but I get the feeling that she slipped this one out there into a bunch of them in the hopes that maybe one of them would eventually. bring Deckard to her? Like if that was her plan,
No, I don't think that was it. I think that was a coincidence. I think that she put the memory out there because, like I said, every great artist puts a piece of themselves in their work, and I think that it just happened to get put into a replicant who then happened to become a Blade Runner, who then happened to get put on the trail of this mystery and started to put it
no, but
together.
I think she must have done it for a reason. For a reason, though, it was a plan behind her doing that. Even if it was even if it was a long shot, because the chances of that happening were astronomical. It happened to pay off, but she must have planned on maybe something coming of it, or else she would have done it. Just because if she had gotten, it could have opened her up to getting caught, and for who she really was to be revealed. You know, she could have very easily shot herself in the foot, and for somebody who's been hiding their entire lives, there's got to be a reason for them to jeopardize their cover that way.
Yeah.
Especially since she's aware of what she is. I mean, it's not a mystery to her. She knows that she's secretly this replicant born through natural
Oh,
means.
she knows?
I think she does, yeah.
I didn't get that sense.
I mean, it seems like it was all planned, you know?
Hmm.
I think that she is in contact regularly with that woman that helped deliver her, the woman who runs the replicant. Um,
What gave you that sense?
I don't know, just the way that the woman was talking about her and then the whole situation, I got the feeling that she was, I mean, she's the one that hid her, obviously, and I get the feeling that it's no accident the woman is where she is in this little corner of the world where people won't come looking for her. I mean, she has to be in that glass bubble anyway because of her immune system thing, which I really like the fact that the first replicant born naturally has like a deficiency, like it didn't come off perfect. Uh,
Hmm.
That's really smart. Any new technology is going to have bugs. That was a really smart way of doing that. I don't know. Just the way that the woman who led the replicant resistance was talking, I got the sense that that they were in contact because she says eventually when the time is right, I will reveal her to the world. It feels like there's a lot of planning going on, you know.
I just wasn't sure that the girl herself knew that she was spawned of a replicant and a human. I didn't get that sense. But it doesn't really matter, though, because... Uh, so wait, when she was a little kid, was the condition just not as bad so she could go out and hang out in the junkyard?
I guess it was something. Well, I mean, that's not far-fetched. There are genetic deficiencies that don't show themselves until people, you know, hit puberty or
It's
later in
true.
life.
It's true.
So I would assume that she started out as seemingly very normal,
Mm.
unless that whole genetic deficiency thing was a fucking lie, and she can leave that bubble whenever she wants.
That's what I thought. That was my impression when I saw the movie. Was that was all a cover so that way? Because what is she gonna do from the bubble for replicant kind?
Um, well, she can.
Be a symbol,
I guess,
sure.
yeah. I mean, that's what I get. I get the sense that that would be the capacity she would like. She doesn't seem like the kind of character that's going to go out there and actually kick ass anyway. I feel like
You
she
would
would
assume
definitely
that she would have to be out there amongst the other replicants, though. But I don't know.
sure, but she could do that and be a symbol all from within a bubble.
I guess, but I
I
didn't.
just don't.
Again, I didn't get that sense watching it. I got the sense that she had no idea who the hell she was, or she thought she did, and uh, and that she had no idea that she didn't have to be in the bubble. That's the impression I got when I was watching, and I got the sense that that was a girl who had been lied to her whole life, and that she
Because
had no,
that woman when she said, "Oh, she will lead the rebellion," I didn't really get like a you know I didn't really get like a John Connor vibe
I
from that.
did. I absolutely got a John Connor vibe from that.
Well, I mean, what I meant is I don't imagine that that woman, based on like what we've seen of her and how she was behaving and you know what her sensibilities get to be, I don't picture her being like the John Connor type of leader. I picture more of like a Mon Mothma type of deal, you know.
Sure. I just
Uh,
don't. I think that we maybe needed a little more clarity on the side of what is true and what is not true in regards to her, But man, it's a great reveal, regardless of all that. Not only does it take you by surprise, but it's just so clever that the scene where Kay thinks he figures out, oh my god, I'm the one. It's really, her kind of putting together that something is afoot. So,
Right.
and it's us realizing, oh shit, these people is not who they think they are. So that's really
The
good.
point is, if she does know that she's a replicant, maybe a half-human replicant, depending on your opinion of Deckard. If she
Yeah,
does
I
know
don't
that,
really know what she would be considered.
even if she does know all of that, well, okay, if she knows all of that, then again, she must have a good fucking reason for putting that memory out there, because that could have come back to bite her on the ass hard. And even if she didn't know all that, it still could have come back to bite her in the ass if anybody had figured out that that was a real memory. They're still breaking the law needlessly. So
Yeah,
there's got to
exactly.
be some kind of
That's definitely a problem.
there's got to be some kind of a grander design here that I'm just not that we're just not putting together yet. Maybe that would have all been revealed in the third movie that they obviously had an idea for. We'll probably never get made now.
Yeah. I mean, hey, the original one didn't perform, and they still made this one. Maybe we'll just have to wait another 30 years.
Blade Runner 2079. Can't wait.
Oh, I'm excited.
Now I'm as old as my dad was when I met him, and I'm going to run this rebellion from my wheelchair.
Oh, good fun. Good fun.
Now the holograph women have Tamagotchis. It's crazy.
They finally got to e-cigs in this world. It's crazy. Because everybody's still I really liked that. Everybody's still smoking actual cigarettes, because that's a detail from the first movie.
Yeah,
we wouldn't be living in a world where it's like, hey guys, it's okay to smoke cigarettes. They're gonna kill you. Really?
Right, they're not health conscious.
Yeah.
If you go to a person in this world and say, "Hey, that'll give you cancer," they'd probably say, "Good."
Thank God. Something to
Sick of
take
this
my
shit.
mind off of the terrifying holographic ad staring at me on a daily basis.
Something to kill me, finally.
Slowly and painfully. Oh, it's gonna be so good.
I'm tired of this. Can't even walk home at night without some giant gay woman approaching me.
Asking me to put her in my cell phone. Oh, yeah, I like that as well. So, Dylan, what else should we discuss?
Well, I'm thinking this is always the hardest part of these reviews, is when you ask me, "What else do you want to say?" and I'm sitting here thinking, "Fuck shit, fuck shit." I'm gonna forget something.
And then I always try to think of things, but
it's even harder with a movie like this that is so
it's
dense,
very dense. Yeah.
jam packed with all kinds of things that bear mentioning. Hmm. Orphanage guy was fun.
Oh yeah, the whole orphanage scene was really interesting because we don't really see kids in the Blade Runner world. Like we don't see them running around the streets like you would in a real city.
Yeah.
It's just there's no children. It's all adults, because why would you want to have a kid in this world?
Right. Well, I mean, there are plenty of children, as we see here, but they're all like in an orphanage.
Right. Well, exactly. Nobody's raising kids though in the city that we see. Because why would
Right.
they? It's a horrible fucking world. So why would you want to bring life into it? That's why Wallace has to create replicants.
Right. It's true.
Oh, it's so good. It's a good movie. That's where I come down on it, man. It's just brilliant science fiction, and I'm always about that.
I don't know if I buy that, though. I don't know if I buy people stopping having children just because, oh, the world's fucked up, I don't want to bring a kid into it. I think that's how human psychology works. It's kind of like how in Jurassic World, when they're like, oh, people have gotten tired of dinosaurs. And I'm like, what?
No, I thought that was an interesting idea in Jurassic World. And I totally buy it. I mean, it would depend on... I mean, it depends on your socioeconomic group for one, and this is also a world where people aren't getting in relationships as much. D.
That's true. It's very Japanese.
It like people are banging replicants. They're banging their holographic wives. I mean, that was the whole point of the holographic wife thing. Was
You know
that
what?
in a
It's true. In a world where replicants exist, I could maybe buy it. Because if you've got a replicant who you can bang, who's pretty much just a person, except you know for a fact that they cannot reproduce. Also, they're way more flexible than a normal person. Yeah, that's what you're gonna do. Probably, they're probably disease free. You know, like
you would assume.
I imagine that the pleasure models must be involved with some sort of antivirus software or something.
Antivirus software. Yeah, they've got Norton on there. Get rid of all that. Get all that spyware out of there and shit.
Got Kaspersky installed in her pussy. It's great.
Good shit. Good shit.
Well, this has devolved.
It has. All right, D. So Blade Runner 2049. Do you think people should see it?
Yes, if for no other reason than you want. People are always bitching. Oh, I want more original movies with interesting ideas. I'm tired of superheroes and the Transformers. And then they come out, and yeah, I know it's technically a franchise film, but I mean, but they come out,
Barely.
Yeah, it's barely a franchise film. But then when an interesting original movie comes out that has things to say and is intelligent, people are like, no.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I want more things like this that are huge and big budget and have this massive scope, but it's a small it's not a small story, but it's a personal, idea driven. It's all about the themes and the character development and the arcs. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's not a movie that's there to entertain you. Like, that's not what this is for. Like, I love stuff like that. I'm a huge blockbuster guy. I'm a huge Marvel movie guy, but that's not what this is for. And I want both. I want a world where I can go to a movie theater and I can watch Thor and Hulk punch each other, and then I can go like dive into this thought-provoking existential world of Blade Runner. We need to be able to have both, and we need to be able to have both get a budget that's going to be serviceable for what they're trying to do.
I mean, you and I are both people who grew up Planet of the Apes fans, so it's, we're used to science fiction that's maybe a bit more cerebral, than what the modern audience is. And I think that's why a lot of people are into the new Planet of the Apes films, but not so much the old ones. I was thinking about this today. It's because the old Planet of the Apes are much more an intellectual exercise, whereas the new ones are much more an emotional exercise.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I think it's just easier for the mass market to acclimatize to that. But yeah, I mean, we do need more of this. We need so much more of this. We need Michael Bay to just stop. And I'm not even talking about Transformers. I mean, just stop in general. And we need more Denis Villeneuve's running around making movies like this. And one thing this movie...
The last movie he made that was like this did do well.
Right. And the other thing that this movie has definitely taught me is to keep an eye on Denis Villeneuve. I mean, I've been hearing things about this guy for several years now. He's been making a name for himself.
You really need to watch Passengers, man. I'm not don't watch Passengers. What's it called? Arrival. I don't know why I get those two things mixed up. Don't watch Passengers. Watch Arrival.
Yeah, I still need to go back and watch Arrival. I thought about doing it before I went to see Blade Runner 2049 because I was curious about his directing, but I decided to wait and let Blade Runner 2049 do the talking. And so now I really do want to go back and watch Arrival. Maybe
we
after
should do that on DFOS at some point.
Yeah, sure. I mean, while we're recording this, it's still October. This video will probably post it after that because we got all this stuff in the pipeline.
Yeah, no, this will probably go up. I don't know. I don't know. I actually don't know when this will go up.
But we're still recording this in October, so it's been pretty much nothing but horror movies for me recently. But as soon as the Halloween season's up, maybe I'll finally give Arrival a go.
Indeed.
I think we've said most, if not all, of the things. And this is running on kind of long, and nobody's listening at this point, so we might as well.
We might as well take our blades and run home.
Exactly.
All right, kids. So that was Dylan and I spoiler analyzing Blade Runner 2049. We hope you enjoyed it. You can hear us do many more things as this on the Demons from Outer Space every week. Follow the SOS Network homepage on Facebook to get updates on that, as always. Subscribe to me here to get that.
Go check out all of the commentary series that we've been doing lately. They've been a ton of fun. We of course started out with Week of Kong, and then we did Talking. We need to do an addendum before long so that we can get a commentary of War out there. But then also the most recent one, the one that is actually still going up day to day at the point that we're recording this, is Commentaries of the Night, where we talk about all of the Universal Monster movies. Even if you're listening to this in post-Halloween world, you can always do with the little classic Universal Monsters in your life.
There's never a time where it's not time for that.
So go check that out. These commentary series have been a lot of fun, I think.
Oh, they're a blast, and it's such a good way for us to talk about those kind of movies, because sometimes when we review that kind of stuff, we're just like, oh, did we talk about this? But when we're looking at it, it's easier to cover everything.
Exactly. We're not left at the end scratching our heads about, there's a thing
like tonight, where we're like, to cover everything.
Yeah, exactly. I know that a commentary asks a little bit more of the audience because you actually have to watch it along with us if you want the full experience. But it really is, I think, well worth it.
We forgot something, or Dylan forgot something. I'm blaming all of this on him. No.
We said this would happen. It is a very dense movie. No, real quickly, I just realized that we went through that whole review without talking about the score, and that's kind of a big thing. And honestly, it was kind of a letdown for me. I don't know about you. I mean, I have to go back and listen to it on its own to really see how I feel about it. But I just felt that it was vastly inferior. And I know I shouldn't compare it, but you can't help but with a sequel. I think it's vastly inferior to Vangelis' score on the original film. And I was really hoping that they would recycle more of the original Vangelis tracks than they do. They do in a couple places. Like when Ryan Gosling dies, there's some music playing that is either the same track or very similar to when Roy died in the first film. But I wish that they had done that more often and recycled more of the music. And just, in that first movie, the Vangelis score is so perfect, and it's just like wall to wall, and it helps establish the world and the ambiance and all that so perfectly. And in contrast, yeah, I guess contrast is the right word. This score just didn't do as much for me personally. And again, I gotta revisit it later. But that was sort of my first takeaway from it. How about you?
I can see that. It's nothing to Vangelis' score, but it is very different, and I do think it is good on its own. I do also wish they would have used more of it. They use a little, not enough for my taste, and not my favorite stuff from the first movie. That's my problem with it, is it's not my favorite stuff.
And I can understand Hans Zimmer and whoever else. I think there were two people, but Hans Zimmer wanting to put his own stamp on it, and maybe not use so much Vangelis because he wanted to do his own thing, and that's fine and that's commendable. But I could have used a little. The music of Vangelis is Blade Runner to me in a lot of ways. It goes so hand in hand perfectly. Like the score to the original Blade Runner is as sacred to me as like John Williams' Star Wars stuff. They go hand in hand that much. And so to not have much of it at all in the sequel is kind of a problem from where I'm sitting. I don't know if that would bother anybody else.
I can definitely see that, but I found myself largely enjoying the score, and I thought that it fit this material really well. Tonally, this is a different thing from the original. It's not nearly as noir detective as the original is, and I feel like Vangelis' score reflects that a lot. Not all the time. So those elements of it, I thought fine for not being here, but I wish they had more of the cityscape stuff. That's what I was missing. Those kind of breathy cityscape shots that would come with that melodic score from Vangelis. That was missing. There was a lot of dun 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 dun, and I'm like, all right, yeah. Hans, we remember The Dark Knight. Thank you.
Yeah. It's certainly much more Zimmer.
Yeah, that's where I had a problem personally.
Which was really great 9 years ago, but you got to pull out some new tricks, buddy.
I completely agree. So is there anything else you wanted to say about the score?
No, I think you finally made the point that I should have made before.
All right then.
Hopefully, that's the last thing that we forgot.
Are you sure? Are you sure there's nothing else? I'm gonna go through the whole movie in my mind now.
Well, I just thought it was weird.
Do
I
you
just thought
like
it was
Ryan
really,
Gosling's outfit? Because I do.
I just thought it was really bullshit that we never got like a cameo from the fat chief from the first movie. It was, no,
Yeah, that's the dad from. That's the Harry and the Hendersons, you motherfucker. I really missed him.
it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it
Shit.
is.
Uh, no, I think that's all. We're really gonna end the video now. I promise.
I don't know. I'm tired. I'm going to bed.